Well, hello there, people, and contact your local mortuary. Get that corpse on the table. Get your scalpels ready and your bone saws in hand. It is time for the debate dissection. This is part two of the Francis Collins and Alex O'Connor debate, which is interesting. We started over on my lovely co-host Ember's channel. How are you, Ember? Welcome back to the channel. To the debate dissection room.
Long time no see. It's been almost 24 hours.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we did a fundraiser for Helen, who's a community member, needed surgery, having a hard time. Really good cause. I should be able to find that actually, and maybe pin it. Is it still open, or did they close it? Is still open?
Yeah.
Okay, I should be able to find that. Then no worries. We did something very recently to try and help out. If you can help out, really appreciate it, because it's hard to be in America. You know, I was talking to my wife and I was sort of saying, hey, if I needed sort of emergency surgery kind of thing, we'd go to the hospital and it wouldn't cost us anything. Oh, there it is. Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I really think that the system that you have sucks, Ember. It absolutely frigging sucks.
I agree. I'm still buried myself. It's just not really a priority at this point because there's other bigger problems. It's just but
well, you know, the public system can be like, if it's not really needed surgery, like if it's just, you know, something to do with maintenance, or, you know, some non-priority surgery, it can take a while in the public system. But it's when it's, you know, really needed, that it's you know, like the Canadian system kind of thing. But, you know, we all kind of know that and what's, you know, really disheartening is that the American authorities, you know, the ones that are just terrible, are now trying to get us to dissolve our systems in favor of an American-styled one, which is just horrendous. You know, it's bad. It's bad.
I can't imagine how they could possibly convince other countries to do that when other countries see how bad it is for Americans. You know, like.
Right.
What are they thinking? I guess the cruelty really is the point.
No, it's making money for corporations is the point, and the medical industry is an industry. You know, it's why they're trying to push back on, say, I don't know if Canada has a similar system, but we have a single buyer for pharmaceuticals. So the government says, hey, we will give, you know, we have these contracts. You're not going to go to the individual companies in Australia. You're going to go through the government, and they will act as a super purchaser, basically, so they can get pharmaceuticals very cheaply by saying, hey, if you don't want to give it to us, we'll go to your competition, or we'll go to another company, or we'll go overseas, we'll go to China, you know, and basically say, hey, if you want this, you know, large amount of money, you've got to do a good deal for us. Then America doesn't do that. It just has every company going and saying, hey, you know, we want to purchase this amount kind of thing. So that's how they keep it low. But, you know, the current regime has taken aim at that, and it is incredibly unsettling. It really is, to say, hey, you've got to pay more for no real benefit so that these companies can make more money. That's essentially it.
Just everyone hand over your money and also go die.
Well, I think it's sort of that idea of, well, if you can't maintain a social class via the way of capital, of course, then you should go die, basically. You know, like if you can't afford these things, then you should go die. And we can see that
they can't maintain their corporate class without our help.
Yes.
It's their way of doing things that's completely unsustainable. But we should go die for their sake.
Yeah. Anyway, so what's this debate about? It is basically
we're doing a debate.
Yeah. I look. I've been distracted doing videos lately. I've started to do live streams, Ems, and I've sort of said, I've had people in the chat bringing up what's happening at the moment, the worldwide scandal that we all know about, and it's kind of, I'm finding it hard not to talk about it. You know what I mean? Like, I see tons of channel doing things, and I'm like, yeah, I'm finding it hard to get away from. And I'm right there with everybody. Like I find appalling. It's disgusting. It's heartbreaking. It's devastating for your confidence in your authority figures or the people in power. Yeah, I. But that's not what we're here to do. I get you though. I'm with you all. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and Kip's from Canada. I do know that. And yeah, it's the same here. Like we have a private health cover as well that allows us to get certain things, skip lines, or have a room to ourselves, kind of thing. It's something that we can do as well. Yeah. Yep. Joe's going to talk about it at 1 p.m., which is like 1 a.m. So how dare you? Actually, that's 2 a.m. for me. So how dare you, Joe, for a start?
Yeah.
But yeah, Joe does politicality, which I would love to see. Okay, so Joe's going to take care of that. He's doing politicality. He'll talk about it. I'd love to be there. 2 a.m. is not the ideal time for me, but hey, do show up if you can. And yeah. Yeah, no, I'm with you, Jedi. I'm with you. I do too, mate. I really do. So, yeah, but we're doing the part 2 of the debate. Part 1 was over on Embers. It was wonderful. It was great. I really enjoyed it. It was a good conversation between people. And at this point, I mean, it's not technically a debate. I grant you. Okay, if you want to split hair, you're technically correct, which is, of course, the best form of correct. But I would rather watch 2 people having a discussion that's not technically debate than some of the dumpster fires that have been coming out of the internet lately. I really am sick and tired of them. You may disagree, sure. Hey, that's cool. But, we don't have to break dumpster fires down. It's very easy to understand what happened. Like basically one or both people are acting childish because they don't have arguments. That's it dissected. That's the entire dissection of it. They're basically acting like fucking children because they don't actually have arguments and would rather do, dog whistles and catchphrases instead of actually making reasoned, logical arguments about things. Now, I found in the first part, I don't know about you, but I'd love to get your opinion. I really would. I found that Francis Collins' epistemology, or his reasoning as to why he believes what he believes, to be kind of lacking, like really lacking. And I found it, like, what really solidified it was when he sort of said, oh, these things cry out to a creator, kind of thing. And to me, that's sort of like, well, I assume there's a creator, but it's not actually explaining why. With all these metaphors, it's sort of like, well, okay, it cries out, but how does it cry out? Right? Like, you can't just leave it at that. It's sort of like, the markings in the Missoula floodplain cries out that there is, a flood happening, a massive flood happening there at some point. But you don't stop there. You say it's because of the, scrapes in the rocks and the, way that these things are, the sort of geological features. You don't stop there, but he sort of stops,
Yeah, it reminds me very much of what we get from the very bottom tier of apologetics to say, every snowflake has 6 sides, so there must be an intelligence forming them. And of course, it's not actually true. There are snowflakes that have no sides. There's snowflakes that are cylinders. There's snowflakes where one arm broke off, and so there's 5, even though it was on the pattern to have 6 or what the fuck ever. There's so many. I did snowflake photography for a couple of years. I still have a few friends who do it because it's a fascinating art form. Yeah,
that is cool.
So neat. It's one thing you can do to dislike winter less. And finding a picture perfect snowflake takes so long because so many of them are so broken. And it's exactly the same thing. It's this not knowing anything about the subject and assuming they're all perfect, and therefore that cries out for an intelligence, because how else could they all be perfect?
Right.
But
Right.
they're not. Same thing
Right.
with life. We're assuming living things are all perfect, but they're not. Francis wears glasses, for fuck's sake. We know they're not perfect, but we're just kind of skipping over that mental bit. But even if there were evidence of a creator, which creator? He's kind of jumping over the whole reasoning to get to Jesus on that one too. He's like, hey, could it be Buddha? Could it be Vishnu? Could it be freaking Ahura Mazda? Must be Jesus, because I said so. You know, it's awful reasoning.
Right, absolutely. And I think his main argument, and the main thrust of his argument, was I mean, wasn't he the one that brought up Aquinas's 5 ways and then basically went into the fine tuning? Now, Aquinas's 5 ways, a lot of philosophers are like, oh, don't hassle them, they're good arguments, they're actually, you know, and it's like, no, they're really not. If you drill down to them, like, he's really making an assumption. You know, the first one being the sort of just a variation on the prime mover, basically, that has been around since sort of Aristotle days, kind of thing. Like, you know, there's the moved and the mover kind of thing with any causal effect, and that's not really how we see things, because you know, we know that. For any effect, you get an equal and opposite reaction. So the mover can become the moved as well. Like, things don't work just in one general direction. And, you know, this whole idea of, well, if stuff is moving, you've got to have something originally that was the cause. And it's like, well, okay, sure, let's just assume and grant it's not multiple causes, or, you know, everything traces back to one cause. Okay, how does that make it a god? Like, I don't understand. It seems to be sort of a case of special pleading that everything needs to have a cause except for the god. Why? Because it's
so
the prime mover. Right. So it just, and then he went on to the fine tuning kind of thing, which, as I said at the time, it's probably the best argument they have. Not great. And I think he made a ton of assumptions outside of his field, which is sort of, you know, I think he was trying to tie it into his field of biology, but a lot of it is made with the, you know, if anybody should understand that humans are not fine-tuned for they're kind of fine-tuned for their environment, but we're evolved for our environment. It's not like we were created as we are, kind of thing. And don't forget, he is an old earth creationist. He's Francis Collins. He's worked in genetics, so he understands evolution and believes in it. So if anybody should understand that we evolved to adapt, like suit our environment, rather than being created already adapted, or you know, the world was created for us, it's Francis Collins. You know, like, absolutely. So yeah, but I'll get it up. Now, do you have any more thoughts while I'm getting the debate rocking?
That pretty much covers it. Just I mean, so Aquinas, there's a couple of things. As most of you probably know, I'm planning to do a Learn Together live on him on the Monday after next. But TLDR, all of his arguments were refuted in his own time by fellow Christians. All of them. They were like, this is a terrible argument. You can't make this. You're going to ruin the church.
Right. Actually, I think
and they're still being parroted today because nobody else has come up with anything better.
But I don't think the arguments are particularly well regarded in philosophical circles, kind of thing. So, I mean, I do like the way that O'Connor is approaching. I mean, he's not just slapping him down, because look, Alex O'Connor is way better at this philosophical stuff, but I think he's very cognizant that people hate it when somebody who knows a lot about philosophy is just really demeaning to people. You know, like it kind of is really, you know, you see those philosophers, and I try not to do that. I don't always succeed, but I try not to just go, oh, but you know, you don't know the three laws of logic, so you know, what are you talking about? And if you don't know the three laws, suddenly you're just a, you know, uninformed peasant who can't think logically.
It's like weird way to ad hom a person. Like, you don't know the three laws, so I don't have to listen to you. That's an ad hominem, bestie. You're avoiding my argument by discrediting me as a speaker.
Right.
You know?
Yes. Yeah. So people, and I think the audience really dislikes that, because not everybody's going to be up. But, you know, he's sort of poking at the holes in his arguments without being very condescending. And I like that about Alex O'Connor. It could be very easy for him to say, hey, Aquinas has been refuted by this person in this way, this way, this way, this way. But he's not. He's putting it in normal language that people can understand. And I think that's really important in a debate, because you're not there to explain to the other person all the ways that he's wrong and that you're superior. That's not why you're there. You're there to explain to the audience why the argument doesn't actually hold up under scrutiny. And if they don't understand the philosophy that you're talking about, it's pointless, right? Like, if the audience doesn't understand why, you know, the say an appeal to consequence is a thing, like why that's a fallacy, then it's kind of pointless. So I do have to remind myself that upon that on occasion, you know, to explain what these are, not just say it, and use examples, analogies, you know, use why we don't think that way. And I find Alex to be really good at that, using analogies to explain it. You know, I guess in another way, he really should be a teacher, because I think he explains these things really well.
He may be on his way to it. It seems like his work in butting heads with butt heads on the internet may be coming to well, not an end exactly, but I sense another phase change in his style of content coming up, because he's just about reached the end of fucking around with Dawkins and Craig and whatnot.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, nobody should be talking to Dawkins, quite frankly. He is a reprehensible person. And maybe I'll do a video about it. I keep saying I'll do a video and I never get around to it. But I want to try, like, sort of, we need better atheist leaders, quite frankly. I think that some of them who are still getting, like, to see Lawrence Krauss do a video, do a debate on morality 11 months ago is I'm sorry, it's fucking appalling. It is appalling that happened. Like, how
stop following people just because they're rich white guys. Like, now, I'm not saying we should shove people out because they're rich white guys, but we shouldn't follow them because they're rich white guys.
Well, I think also we shouldn't follow people just because they're owning the Christians, right? Like, just because they're sort of, you know, taking them to task or doing really well, you know, we shouldn't be following people just because, oh, he went into this debate and did this, you know, awesome argument, kind, you know, give a shit. Like, don't just assume they're a good person because they're owning someone you don't like. You know, and
really important for us in the U.S. because that seems to be the majority of the appeal to popularity for Gavin Newsom is he's able to get under Trump's skin in exactly the same way Trump gets under the liberal skin. And that's fun to watch, but the man is not a good person.
Right. And he seems to be very flippant with his positions, sort of depending on what he's trying to accomplish at the time. I sort of see Newsom as a bit too, look, you may like him, I find him a bit too Machiavellian for my liking. Like, I think sort of the end justifies the means with that gentleman. And you know, I don't agree with a lot of stuff that he says. I think Hassan Piker came out recently sort of saying, hey, he's an establishment guy, you know, and I would agree. He's an establishment guy. He'll be working for the corporations. I get why Hassan said what he said, I don't agree with him. I think that an establishment guy is better than an authoritarian guy, but I understand what he's saying when he sort of says the Democrats need to do better. They need to do better. And
absolutely.
They've got a ton of progressives who could do way better than him. But
we don't have to settle for a freaking dumpster fire, dude. We've got AOC, we've got Ilhan Omar. Hell, we can apparently Bernie can still run if we're gonna put people who are literally on life support in the White House.
Well, I mean, Bernie's still pretty sharp, but I would I think AOC, like, she is old enough, and I understand the hesitancy to put a woman in for some reason. Like, I don't get me wrong, I don't agree with it, but people are like, oh, woman, they can't run things. Like, if it's gonna get rid of Trump, I just don't see how the Republicans could. Anyway, I'm getting caught up in American stuff. I'm sorry. Like, tangents in the chat.
For mentioning Gavin Newsom and all that nonsense.
No.
It's never your fault. Who's able to burn a brighter dumpster fire, and they're like, this man will be my spiritual leader.
Yes.
We're supposed to be critical thinkers. We don't do that shit,
Right. Yeah. I totally agree with you. Well, I mean, it's okay if you are pushing back against sort of dumbass rhetoric and nasty stuff. I get you, like, having a quick wit, be able to respond, all good. But if you're just dunking on people because they don't know or haven't read the philosophy you have, or you're just trying to belittle them, that's not cool. Like, come on, that's not cool. And I try to avoid it all possible. Sometimes you do, like, it happens, but we try to avoid it, right? Look, I know, because I was thinking about this the other day. Okay, tangents in the chat. I know I'm going well. I haven't even played the fucking video. This is crazy.
Tangents upon tangents. No, the central bit is that while Alex is capable of going, appeal to authority, slippery slope, straw man, black and white fallacy, he can just shoot the shit down. He'd rather engage Francis in the idea, not just like point out the fallacy and say you're wrong, you need to address this, but like dig into it and be like, why do you think this?
Right. And I do know that occasionally I have been told that I make people feel like I'm making them feel dumb, and I really am not trying to do that. I'm not, honestly. I really am not. If I could be any other way, I would. But I had a video that I was going to put up, and I'm not sure because it makes the guy look terrible, and I'm not out for that. But I probably will. Look. Yeah. Okay. Well, moving right along. Let's go. Let's go with this debate because, I'm kind of in a weird mood. I've been in a weird mood all week. This week has been, it's been, I don't even know how to describe it. It's been this week's been fucked up, Ember. Seriously, this has been a fucked up week. Like maybe a couple of weeks. Like it has been a fortnight of holy crap, and I'm with you all, but I will start the video and we can talk about what they're talking about rather than what the entire world is talking about. Let's compartmentalize, Ember, you and me together. Compartmentalize. Let's go. Let's freaking go. All right.
No referent. It's not a thing. God can do all things. Four-sided triangles just aren't things. And so I totally understand that. But if it's, well, God couldn't create a life-permitting universe in which everything was the same except for gravity being 2 times as strong, he couldn't have done that. Well, I do see that as a challenge to his omnipotence, because that doesn't seem like a logical contradiction in the same way. It seems like a physical contradiction, but not a logical one.
I guess the other fact.
Yeah, this is pushing back against fine-tuning. Just quickly, left-handed Jedi for $2 US. Came for the commentary, stayed for the tangents. Yeah, I'm going to stop calling these freedom dollars and start calling them totalitarian dollars or fascist dollars. Okay, so I'm sorry, no. You've lost your freedom dollar, sort of thingo. Well, it could be worse. I mean, I could be calling them pedo dollars. Like, seriously, it could be way worse. Yeah, no, I look, that's a joke. I'm so sorry. That's a joke. Too soon?
That hurts, Mark. That hurts.
Too soon? Yeah, too soon. Okay, I'm sorry.
I mean,
too soon.
We did lose. People in the US are playing fucking pretend over here, but there's no disguising when you're in an online space where there's currency transactions and equalities and evaluations. The US dollar has lost 30% of its value over the last year. We're all like, oh, inflation is down. No. Our currency is being devalued rapidly.
That's good for me, I guess, if I'm, buying. It's not good for me in getting paid from YouTube, but it's good for me in if I buy, donate to somebody in the US, but the Australian dollar's up versus it. But hey.
It's true. There was someone the other day who sent us super chat. I forget which stream it was on because I watched too many dang streams. But
yeah,
they were doing Argentine pesos, and for what to them was $3.50 equivalent, showed up in YouTube as over $50 in value because the peso had gone up and the dollar had gone down so much that YouTube still hadn't caught up.
Right. Wow. Okay. Yeah. No. That's and the worst part is that if you are using American dollars to buy overseas good, then the tariffs also make that doubly as bad because you then have 10% on top that you've got to pay, that either the company has to swallow, which they can't if the dollar value is going down. They doubly don't want to do that. And then, if they do swallow it, where does the extra, where do they get their profit from? Well, if you're lacking profit in business and you've done all the efficiency measures you can, there's only one way to get profit, and that's to reduce expenditure, which is usually firing staff. Just saying.
Here that we haven't said explicitly is that God apparently is interested in nature following order. And the fact that there are those equations governing matter and energy, they didn't have to be there. But if you'll take as a given that God is interested in order of nature, and also that God is interested in having complicated creatures like us, then I think the only means to that end is to have that gravity constant in our universe be. And so, yeah, I guess you could say there's a constraint there because otherwise God's goals are not achieved.
Well, I think the second point that you made,
Well, I mean, but that leads back to why can't a god make it ordered, but with gravity twice as strong? Like, it's sort of, you have to give up the idea of omnipotence, or at least maximally powerful at that point. Sort of, basically the ability to do anything except witches, and this is sort of a philosophical description, but it's the ability to do anything that is not logically impossible, like what Alex O'Connor was talking about, like a married bachelor or a four-sided triangle kind of thing, which is that's breaking the law of identity. But if you can set up a universe where gravity is twice as strong and you still have intelligent beings after your own, made in your own image come out, that's not logic. That doesn't violate any logical rules.
Yeah,
it lends to the next couple topics because
as the morality problem fundamentally is, if it comes from God, then it shouldn't be, he shouldn't have to match the certain physical parameters.
Right.
And if it doesn't come from God, then he doesn't have control of the physical parameters.
Yes. Like, you have to give up the idea. If he is constrained by having to have these parameters slot in with each other at certain values, then, you're sort of going, well, God didn't decide them for the universe. Then the question comes, well, what did? Because if you have to have gravity as a certain, certain value, if the weak nuclear force is this other value, or the speed of light is this value, then what creates that law? because he's saying that comes from God. God decides what those laws are. And now he's sort of saying, well, God likes order, so he had to make it that way. It's like, well, why did he have to make it that way if he's just making it up? Like, why?
And like, if his goal is order, a singularity is very ordered. Nothing moves. It stays where you put it forever.
I think from someone who is in an agnostic position, it would feel like a jump to say that this being, let's just say that whatever, there was an intelligent designer behind the fine tuning. Again, like I was mentioning earlier, that would only indicate that maybe a deist perspective of something created us.
Right.
But then there's another further jump of this being wants to be in relationship with us, which kind of begs the question of, the moral argument that we were talking about. But then also kind of aligned.
Yeah, and Kip's bringing up what the moderator's sort of saying. I'm not even sure biblical authors were convinced that God was at all interested in having a relationship with him. Yeah, I would agree. I think that, from what I've seen from the Bible, Kip, it seems to be that God's interactions are all filtered through, the prophets and the people, special people who have that interaction and then relay that to the rest of the people.
Right.
That it isn't everybody has the Holy Spirit and everybody communes with God and everybody's going to do this. It is really that there are special people in the world who get to engage with this being, and you listen to them because, or else plagues are coming and a whole bunch of smitings going on. Yeah.
Why is there a need for prophets if God wants a relationship with you individually? Why did Elijah have to go and tell the ruler of the fucking sackcloth kingdom that he needs to get his ass humble real quick or God's coming for him, if God wants a relationship with everyone? It's very strange.
Well, he didn't in the Old Testament. Like, he really didn't in the Old Testament. I think God's interaction with everyone was more just manna from heaven kind of thing as they crossed the desert. Like, I don't know what that was supposed to be, but he certainly, he seemed to limit to dropping some form of food on them. But, and Kip's pointing out exactly what the moderator is saying. How do you get from this deistic, a God, switched all the levers of fine tuning and then walked off and said, hey, sort it out yourselves, to a Christian God who wants a relationship with every single human, which sounds exhausting, quite frankly. I have a intimate relationship with one human, and that's enough. That's a lot of work. So I don't know how you get there.
I mean, poly's not for everybody. It's fair.
No, I get you. I got no problem with it. It's just, I personally, I find, I think that one's enough for me. I think I would find it too exhausting, quite frankly. But that's okay. That's okay. You get to choose. But yeah, it's the motte-and-bailey thing, and in philosophy, a motte-and-bailey sort of fallacy is when you have a motte, an outer curtain, outer wall of a castle, and you basically extend to that. Then when you're taking arrows, you're under a lot of fire, you retreat to the bailey, which is the keep, the castle in the center. So he's sort of got this, the Christian Bible values all of this kind of stuff, but he's going, like, under pressure, he retreats to the inner, fine tuning. God created all of the numbers and the constants in the universe. He can defend that, saying, hey, you can't prove me wrong. And it seems like there is an order to that. So we've got to look for, every order requires an orderer, It's just, okay. Sort of you can retreat to that and say, well, you can't prove me wrong. But he's really, he's come into it. What was the title of this debate or discussion? It was kind of just Christian God, wasn't it? Oh, it's just God. Does God exist? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it doesn't make me angry. It doesn't make me mad, but it does sometimes just irk me. Like the low level annoyance just irk me that people will be promoting Christianity. Then when they're drawn into a debate, it's not about the Christian God anymore. It's not about the God that you can presumably pray to and get stuff. It is about did a God start the universe? And it's like, well, that isn't what you promote in your normal theology. That isn't what you're promoting. It's a fallback position to, well, I can't demonstrate that when you pray, it cures cancer. So I'm going to just go back to, well, God manipulated the stuff in the first place. It's annoying. Only slightly, because you understand what they're doing, but it is sort of like, yeah, okay, you can't defend Jesus. Let's go to create a God in general. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which is one of the reasoning I
that
go with nil, because like if you have a creator God, that just demonstrates the need for a creator of creator gods.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a reductio kind of thing, a reductio ad absurdum, which in that is like putting a counterexample or using the same argument and inserting some sort of other thing into it to show how absurd it is or make it illogical. Because if they can claim there's a creator God of the universe, then you should be able to, using the same chain of logic, claim that there is a creator of the creator God. And if they say, oh, God was uncaused, there can't be a creator God, you can say, yes, it was nil, right? There's no problem with doing that, because they're not actually demonstrating that a God was uncaused. They're just claiming it. So if they can claim something is uncaused that caused the universe, everything, you can use the same chain of logic to claim there is a cause of that thing that they're claiming is uncaused that created it. You are completely well within your rights, because you're using exactly the same argument they are.
Mm-hmm. It's one of my favorite tricks. And in fact, I was doing it before I ever took a debate class, because using people's logic against them is like the first thing you learn when you're arguing with other children. Like, oh, by your logic, this makes sense then, to show them how ridiculous it is. But I found out in debate class that was one of Plato's favorite tricks too, is he'd find a flaw in a chain of logic, and then he'd just add a step that follows the same rules of the rest of the chain. And it became really obvious where the flaw was when he did that.
Yeah, I mean, I did that in school as well, used people's logic against them. And when the bruises had healed, I thought, it may not be the best tactic, but, you live and learn, right? You live and learn.
That really popped up in my mind when you were talking about that if the reasoning you're using with the fine tuning. I've also heard with the problem of evil one, which is basically that couldn't have God created a world where there was free will and there wasn't evil, or there wasn't suffering or something like that, and people would have free roam.
I mean, there are questions to ask on either side here, right? And by the way, I offer these questions and objections to fine tuning. I mean, it may just be that yes, God is, insofar as we grant that he has a particular will, he is constrained by things like the strong, weak nuclear force. That seems strange to me. That might just be true. And I still think it's a powerful argument. I'm not a scientist. I don't understand this. I'm sort of raising these questions. I totally understand the power of the fine-tuning. I do. And so when confronted with the universe as we find it, I think the best...
I love that Alex saying, hey, I'm not a scientist. I can't talk categorically on what all of these forces are and what they do. It's a very good strategy up front to sort of say, hey, I'm not a scientist, but I do understand the fine-tuning argument. I think that, it's interesting that no astrologers or cosmogonists, people that study the origin of the universe, are making the fine-tuning argument. They're not saying, hey, this shows that there was a God. They more say, I mean, except for religious ones.
I was going to say, they were more,
well, a majority of physicists and overwhelmingly astronomers are actually atheists. They sort of separate that God thing, because you can't actually say, well, it's obvious that a creator made these things the way they are. I don't think so. I mean, usually they would sort of say, hey, there is something that produced this result. We don't know what it is. Because they can't actually show that it was a God, and there's other reasons why things come out the way they do. I get that the fine-tuning says, hey, it looks fine-tuned, but I don't think a lot of physicists are arguing that it is actually fine-tuned. You know what I mean? I don't think that's a thing. it's like evolution. And of all people, Francis Collins, who's worked on the Human Genome Project, should understand the illusion of design that comes with evolution. It looks like things are designed, but it's not design, because it was never plotted out there in advance to make this thing the way it is. What happened was it's just whatever was suited for the environment survived, and the things that weren't suited didn't. So it comes out with the illusion of design when all it is survival of the fittest. That's it.
It's astonishing to me that Collins, who has to know that we've done knockout tests on DNA sequences and found that an organism can operate, it varies from organism to organism, but some of them with as much as 50% of their DNA sequences removed. You can just knock half the alleles out because they don't do anything, apparently, or at least they're not active in most of the somatic cells. And so you can continue on just fine without those DNAs. And it's wild that he knows that the DNA is definitely not designed. But then he turns around, and I love that Alex was like, I'm not a scientist, because he's appealing to Collins' sense of science of like, maybe you shouldn't be talking about a different field that you're not a specialist in a way that you would not like someone talking about your field they're not a specialist in, perhaps.
Well, I think for this, I mean, I get that. I mean, Francis Collins is just talking about his beliefs, you know, and I don't think, I think there's a lot of, like, I asked this to, I had on Dr. Kip and Dr. Bowen, Josh Bowen, and I sort of asked them this, is it, like, it's hard for scientists to discuss their opinion on things because they have this standard of professionalism. So I kind of feel like we've got to give scientists the leeway of saying, hey, I'm not a scientist in this field, but here's my opinions on it. Because why do I, as a layperson in sort of any field, you know, like I'm just a layperson, right? Technically, I get to discuss all of this stuff and give my opinions, but a scientist is supposed to just limit themselves to their particular field. So I think that it's kind of, I can imagine, well, I can only imagine it'd be annoying because, you know, some person like Joe Rogan can say whatever he wants, but as a scientist, you're expected to be reserved on the things you believe. So I kind of think that Francis Collins should be allowed to discuss this or all he wants, but it is kind of strange that he doesn't understand the appearance of design versus actual design. I totally agree, but I don't have a problem with him discussing it. I think it's good that he discusses his beliefs. You know, I think that it's really flawed. But you know, I don't have a problem with a scientist going, hey, this isn't my field, but here's what I believe on this, because I think everybody gets to do that. And I don't see why we should limit scientists be able to do that either.
Well, there's a couple of thoughts that come to mind. The first is that because of their standing as scientists, as experts, as people whose, when they speak, they should be trusted. When they start speaking about things outside of that area, they should be trusted on. It's sort of like a transference of authority. It's not their fault, but it's something the public does. It's the same reason licensed physicians can't talk about medical pseudoscience except to debunk it, you know, by offering an opinion on the efficacy of Joe Rogan's nose pills or whatever. Giving credibility to it when it's a professional responsibility to not do that. And
well, someone tell Dr. Oz that, all right? Because seriously,
fucking real.
Yeah.
So there's a couple other possibilities too. I mean, I get that, like, in a strictly religious context, like, he's invited here for a debate about God. Of course, in that context, he should be permitted to talk about God and whatnot, but that's not what he does. He goes around to conferences and revivals and so forth, and he says, as a scientist, I say there's a God, you know? And that's why Francis he gets brought to all those events.
Really? Because I mean, the interviews that I've seen with him, he sort of says, "Hey, I keep my God beliefs out of science," like, because he stated categorically, at least earlier in his life. I don't know what he's up to now. I must be, I don't follow Francis Collins. I'll be honest with you, but he sort of says, hey, there was that famous interview where he said, oh, well, I have a belief in God, but it doesn't come from the genetic side of things. Like he categorically stated that. He said that, hey,
Which
it
is
comes
weird.
from... Well,
because
yeah,
if there were the God he believes in, it should be evident in the genetics he works on.
But he's hiding, Ember. He's hiding. Darling, he's hiding from everybody, okay? Like, he's got divine hiddenness. He hides
He's
himself.
very shy.
He's a very shy little lad. And he just feels like if he put himself in the genetic sequence going like Yahweh was here or whatever, then people would automatically believe and he'd take away their... That is the worst argument. I hate that argument. I hate that I'm even making it in jest right now, because, even if we did know that God exists, it doesn't mean that we'd worship him or in any way have a quote unquote relationship with him kind of thing. Yeah, exactly, Kip. He once saw a beautiful frozen waterfall that was like in three tiers, and it reminded him of the Trinity. Sure, yeah. And so that was that interview. And so maybe his position has shifted somewhat. I just don't find but he doesn't use genetics in that thing. He usually says like when he made the argument of creation cries out that it's created kind of thing, he was kind of using it for look at the trees, not genetics, right? Like he wasn't talking about genetic coding and how all of these things work. He was talking about, and he was doing an Otangelo and saying, oh, those things are actually machines. He was talking about just ordinary natural things. I shouldn't say his name. If we say it 3 times, he'll appear in chat and tell us about the Shroud of Turin. Yeah.
Best thing we can do is ask on either hypothesis, atheism or theism, what we would expect to find, and then look at what we do find, right? And so what do we find? The existence of a universe. Okay, score 1 for theism, because that is pretty incredible. Something rather than nothing, finely tuned constants. That's great. Once you get past that sort of fundamental origin point, explaining those points, then we look at what the universe is. Okay, sort of mostly cold, lifeless place. Don't get me wrong, it's very beautiful and very, very cool and all of that. Yeah. But insofar as there isn't an observer to see that, there's no conscious life going on. Conscious life finally evolves on planet Earth billions of years after the beginning of the universe, and does so in the most brutal imaginable way. Natural selection as the process by which humans came to be on this planet, which I'm told is the ultimate end of this entire Vale of Tears, was for the sake of humanity. And the mechanism that is chosen to bring that about.
Well, I mean, it depends on what you're after. That's assuming that humanity is the end goal, which presumably, according to Christians, it is. But if you're going to, take a real sort of deist approach and sort of go back to that inner wall and say, hey, it just was some random god that created all this stuff and then said, let her... It was like a, doing those Beyblades kind of thing, just let them rip and then walk off kind of thing. Like it just, I just go, well, what is the end? Maybe God needed plastic, and needed humans to create plastic. Maybe the end goal is plastic. Who knows? This is the thing. You could argue just about anything. You could argue with a deist God. You could argue that humans are unfortunate byproduct, that we weren't supposed to come in, like he let it run and that's what happened, And then you get into theists that sort of say, hey, God's like someone that's created a simulation theory kind of thing, or a deist that says, hey, it's all a simulation and we're just playing out what the I think that's a flawed argument by O'Connor if he didn't know that was a Christian in front of him with Christian beliefs. I get why he's saying it, because Francis Collins is a Christian and advocates that personal relationship with God. But if you take that away, humans don't have to be the end result.
Yeah, could be jellyfish, could be AIs. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah. So I don't mind the argument just because Francis Collins, but I feel like Francis Collins is going to try to drag it back to that Bailey, the inner keep kind of thing of some God, and really I see Alex trying to drag it back into Christian. Like, why Christianity? Why be in this religion? Why not just be a deist and just live your life according to scientific principles and not, don't you can go to church. There's universalist churches and stuff. There's secular churches. There's community centers. There's all kinds of things. Like, why believe you have a personal relationship with this being?
Yeah, it's so weird, but also that struggle to like go back to, well, there's some God, probably, almost for sure. Like, did you call yourself a Christian? What did Jesus say about the believers who deny him? Like, why are you backing off? If you're going to believe it, tell me why you believe it.
Right. Right. Yeah. And so it does got exist stuff. I know what they're sort of, but I find this all the time, especially with sort of debate bros. It always devolves into a deist God instead of a Christian God. Pre-subs are the same. They will just like, it was funny because one of the worst pre-subs out there is Darth Dawkins, and he wouldn't mention Jesus ever. Like, he would not, if somebody said, yeah, I believe in a God, now why is it Jesus? He would just end the conversation. He didn't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
It's wild.
His whole thing is dunking on atheists. If you're a different kind of theist, he has nothing to say to you.
Right.
Or maybe it was necessary, again, a further constraint on God. But it seems plausible that this naive popping into existence, Adam and Eve type thing could have been done, but it wasn't. What happened instead was a series of slow, brutal evolutions over billions of years, in which 99% of the species, let alone the animals, who've ever lived on this planet have been wiped from existence, sometimes in the most painful imaginable circumstances. Survival of the fittest is the same thing as the death and destruction of the unfit. The problem of evil always comes up in a human context. And people can say, okay, well, maybe evil exists because of human free will, or maybe because it develops our soul, or because it allows us to achieve higher order goods, things
so
like
you're saying
bravery.
It applies to animals as well.
But animals have undergone much more suffering, at times in terms of the actual crude physical pain that they're feeling, but in terms of the numbers as well. Even just today, the number of animals alive experiencing pain and suffering in the world is unfathomably huge. And so I ask, okay, what would I expect to see if this was being sort of organized with the intention of bringing about human beings, with the intention to enter into a loving relationship with them? I don't think I'd expect to see anything like this circus of suffering. And yet,
let's extend that to humans. Like for years and years and years. I mean, it is the case that we were tribalistic and tribes just attacked one another and, just slaughtered it. I mean, it's in the Bible that they slaughtered other tribes for their land. And yes, they were promised the land by a god according to the book. But, it is a thing that we did. So why is that the case? Like, why is this the case from a loving God that you're supposed to have a relationship with? And it's like, I love how he's bringing it back to the Christian side of things, but he's got a real point. And for the atheist, this is a really easy answer. Like, he is bringing up, okay, so look at what's happening here in this debate. Collins is bringing up the strongest of arguments for the theist side, right? Fine-tuning, okay? And Alex is going, okay, yeah, if you get the initial parameters of the universe, sure. Okay, it's got the appearance of fine-tuning, sure. And he's basically saying, okay, just grant that that's true, it's fine-tuned. But then we get to the strongest argument for the atheist side, which is the problem of evil, right? Like, he's explaining the development into humans as sort of evil. Now, for the atheist, this is a really simple question. Like, oh, why is there so much suffering? Why is there so much evil in humans coming about? Well, it's not evil. There's no intentionality behind it. Like nobody intends for that to happen. That is just a byproduct of the way that life developed. You don't have to say it's evil. But a theist who believes, a Christian theist, not a deist, but a theist, someone that believes in a personal God, can just, they did intend for that to happen. So it is evil. And I think that that's why, you know, evolutionary theory, you know, the Christians are like, oh, it's so evil. And it's like, not in an evolutionary worldview. In an atheist worldview, it's not evil because it is just a byproduct. Nobody intended for it to happen. Like, nobody was there saying, hey, let's cause all this destruction for years and years and years and years. It's just a thing.
There's no one to stop it. There's no one who put it in motion. It's just nature doing nature things.
Yeah.
It's weird, perhaps.
Yeah.
We live in a universe where balls of rock happen to hang in these perfectly balanced orbits to stay stable around stars at just the right distance to have the atmosphere like we have, so we can have the liquid water that we do, so that life can reach this advanced state. It's really cool, but humans aren't even inevitable. But if there were someone who's balancing the rocks and getting them in those right orbits and planning the apocalypses to make sure that humans evolve at the right time and yada, 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 then why do it this way? It's so weird. It's even weirder, you know?
Yeah. I don't, you know, and I figure he's going to go back to the old deistic kind of thing, but it's a really good question. And Alex uses this from the perspective of animals. I can use it from, even without animals, you can sort of say, hey, floods and fires and things like that is absolutely brutal times in our history. You know, you can't even say it's free will doing those, but presumably those are part of the fine-tuned universe that God ordered, that we would be, you know, that people on Pompeii would be, you know, char frozen into statues. You know, like, presumably that's something that he ordered up. Like, let's cook these humans.
And there's no legends, nothing saying the people of Pompeii have greatly sinned and offended yada yada God, and that's why that happened. Like, even that was what, 72 CE, something like that. It was in the first century era ish, and nobody was saying they have angered the great God. This is proof. Even though it's ad hoc proof, because nobody predicted it, we're only saying it after the fact, but no one said that. It was just a thing that happened because that's where gods were at that time. Nobody thought a god, except possibly a volcano god, like maybe if they pissed off Vulcan, but nobody even thought they pissed off Vulcan, you know?
Yeah. Explain Atlantis. Checkmate, atheists. Yeah, I'm just looking at the chat. I think that sin, like, so sin, the closest I can get is immoral actions, but it's sort of sin. The whole sin is transgressing of a God, which atheists don't do. But if someone wants to use the word sin to mean an immoral action, look, I can accept that. Like, I can just say, okay, that's how you're using it, kind of thing. You know, I think that that's fine. Do I have a problem with me saying that I sin? I think I do, because to me at least, sin represents a transgression against a God which I don't believe in. But, you know, honestly, if an atheist says, hey, sins to me are just immoral acts, I say, sure, okay, fine, not a problem.
That it's all mindfully evolving accidentally in some competition for survival, and some, like, not only do we explain what we see in the history of our planet and the world today, but we also come to expect it. And so I think that this is definitely score one for atheism. And I understand the problem of evil. I'm not the first person to bring this up, right? But I do think that the theodicies that are often put forward about why evil exists, such as free will, such as soul building, such as higher order goods, just simply do not apply to the suffering of non-human animals. That seems to me utterly inexplicable.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think you even have to go there. I don't get me wrong. I'm not particularly averse to O'Connor's arguments. I think there is something to be said that if the God says, well, humans have dominion over the animals, and he just doesn't care about animals, like, he's only good in relationship to humans, and the animals can go get stuffed, basically. Like, I you know, if that's what they want to claim, that he's only you know, maximally good or omnibenevolent in the realm of humans, and animals are, because there are some Christians that will go, well, your pets will go to heaven, and so what happens to animals, obviously, but some will say that because animals don't have a soul, they don't go to heaven, and they also don't experience pain. And that's weird to me, right? Like, that's a really weird thing to say. I have heard that argument. They have no souls, so they're like just empty husks walking around. And it's like,
that doesn't work.
Yeah,
we can demonstrate that's not true. We know they experience pain, and also we still don't know what the fuck a soul is.
Yeah, well, I'm not making this argument. I'm saying that's what I've heard. But you have a problem with something called a philosophical zombie, and that is, if you had a infinitely accurate automaton that just displays characteristics of pain and happiness and all these emotions, how would you be able to tell the difference? Because you can't actually feel what they're feeling, right? Like,
Descartes' demon. If it's
right,
tricking you into thinking there's another person instead of a demon, then how would you know?
Right. How would you know? And that's sort of a problem. Like, so if you have a zombie, right, like a soulless husk is sort of how it's described. There's no way you could tell the difference between that and a real person. So it goes down a line that is scary, because we know that sort of psychopathy, one of the way it presents itself in children, is harming of animals. Like, they don't see animals as being worth anything. And moreover, they don't see humans as being worth anything either. So I think it's a real dangerous route to go down, number one. Number two, we can't really second guess, like, we see pain responses. We don't really second guess that in humans. I'm not sure why we're second guessing them in animals. Like, when we clearly see something in pain, I don't know why we would say, oh, well, that's just a robot responding. It's this idea of a soul makes something have this additional worth, and without it, it isn't actually experiencing the world. That when we can't find the soul is just, all it is just categorizing people into value and non-value, and I do not hold with that. So, I think that this whole argument is terrible. But I'm just pointing out that some people have said, God doesn't care about animals because they're like robots.
Then why do you bother to make them? Very strange.
So humans can have dominion over them, because he clearly says he has dominion over the animals.
But he made the animals first, and he went, "Oh, I need a gardener to take care of all these critters."
Like, well, maybe the end goal isn't humans. Maybe it's the animals he created first, and we're just here to caretake them. You ever thought about that?
I have, actually. I was thinking about that just earlier this evening after I dropped my son off. I was listening to Dr. Kip's book as I was driving, and we're on another section about, like, the ascendancies of gods, and how, like, some gods beat up other brother gods, and it just reminded me so much of the story of Eden, the way one god would condemn other gods, even whole groups of gods, in the name of the high god, but that god itself was not the high god. And it made me think of Eden, the way, I don't know, the investiture of, this is your place to take care of. You're supposed to care for this place, and you're fucking it up, and so you need to get out. It struck me so much like Eden, and I'm like, I wonder. So yeah, I was pondering that earlier.
The very existence of animals at all seems superfluous and unnecessary. If God creates the world with the intention to bring about human beings, or maybe he creates animals because they're beautiful and they're great and they bring us joy. But at what cost? Like, if I gave you the opportunity to become a wild animal, a random wild animal right now, I could press a button and you're about to become a random wild animal somewhere in the world. And you think about the life that you're about to live, the death that you're probably about to experience, the fear that you're going to live until that happens. I think you kill yourself before I press the button. And
I don't know about that, but I prefer not to. Definitely, I don't know about I don't know about killing myself before that happens. No, No, it depends on the animal. I mean, some people's pets live incredibly well, Alex. I don't know if you know this, but
It's
you
true.
know, yeah.
That says everything we need to know about
there's a lot of pluses, like wild ospreys, for example. Ospreys do not die of old age. If they reach sufficient old age, they die of blindness, because the sun reflecting off the water that they have to gaze into in order to find the fish that they live on, it eventually causes cataracts and blinds them, and then they starve. And that's an extremely unpleasant way to go. But before that happens, they get to fly.
Well, that's true. That's true. And I mean, I know that you know, maybe being a honey badger would be just a riot, you know, because honey badgers just don't care. They don't give a fuck. Like, they really, you know, yeah, maybe, I don't know. You know, and I've seen some animals having a cheeky good time. I've seen a crow playing with a tree and just having a blast. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom for animals. I think that they do have parts of their lives they do enjoy. But yeah, no, I totally get you. I'd rather be a human in human society than an animal in the wild. Absolutely. But I'm not sure about, you know, I'm not sure about killing myself before that happened. You know, and it certainly does, like, it really does reinforce the idea of be good or else reincarnation, right? Like, you get reincarnated as a you know, a sheep near a wolf den or something. It's just
that would be most unfortunate.
Yeah.
Suffering.
How do you work through this question? I mean, I'm sure it's come up for you.
Oh, it has. And it's a hard problem. I will grant you that. I do think your description, with the use of the word brutal throughout, is maybe a little extreme. That in fact, over all of these hundreds of millions of years of living things, there is incredible beauty in this tapestry of the things that have come to pass. And some joy has been experienced by those animals as well. I recognize most animals are not in a position really to be aware of their own mortality. So the idea that our idea of fear of death, which we carry around every hour, would be also felt in a broad way. I'm not sure that's true, but that's not sufficient. I can only understand this in the sense that, again, I see God as a God of order, having put in place natural laws that are going to govern the behavior of matter and energy. The idea that a creative process that involved a lot of supernatural interpositions in that effort was not the path that fit together with this rigorous, sort of scientifically well-designed plan, whereas evolution is this incredibly elegant way to achieve those goals.
Is it?
Yes, with a lot of pain and suffering.
I mean, it gets the job done, but it's kind of weird that you're sort of saying, hey, these constants are all fine-tuned, but we're not. Like, we've got sort of evolutionary hangovers, if you will, some really unfortunate effects, tribalism for one, fear responses for another, that are sort of kind of inconvenient in modern society. We have these byproducts of evolution. You know, I don't see it as sort of, you know, evolution has fine-tuned these things. I see it as, yeah, it appears fine-tuned, but in reality, things just are, and things that aren't suited are brutally removed. So I don't see, as opposed to creating things in the universe with constants, as opposed to evolution, I don't see one as particularly ordered. I see evolution as incredibly chaotic, especially with random mutation coming up, you know, and selecting against them. I don't see how you could say that is ordered.
It's wild to claim that evolution is an elegant system. It's as messy as you might expect of a system that had to organize itself because there was no intelligence steering it.
Right, exactly. Yes. Well, very well put. Yes. Like, if something was steering it, you would expect it to be a lot more ordered. I just don't know how he views the process of evolution as ordered, you know, with lineages coming out and then looping back in because they're breeding with the, you know, other lineage that they came from, and, you know, Neanderthals in our DNA and all of this stuff. Like, I I don't see that as elegant. It's incredibly messy and hard to track. I think that a feature of sort of biology and evolution is being messy. It is. Yeah, I don't know how you would sort of say that's ordered. It is chaotic. Wow.
Suffering, to be sure, although I don't think we have a full grasp of exactly what that experience might have been like hundreds of millions of years ago by all of those species. As long as you're going to say that life doesn't go on forever, all of those had to be ultimately dead anyway. So it's not as if it was only evolution that caused them to die. Many of them died a natural death. It's a hard problem, I grant you that. The data says that's what happened.
Natural death?
So perhaps.
Well, everybody dies a natural death, sure.
That's what I mean. Is he saying many of them died a natural death? Who isn't? What do you mean many? Like, are there supernatural deaths? Like, what? I realize he's not like a philosophy bro, so he may have worded that carelessly. But the implication is that he's positing there are supernatural deaths.
No. I think he's sort of saying died from natural causes rather than some other animal murdering them. But I would put it to you that I've been with people dying from a natural death, and it's not, it usually is not a peaceful thing. It usually isn't, oh, well, I'm happy to go kind of thing. There's a lot of fear involved. There's a lot of, regret involved. You try to make them as comfortable as possible, but it's not a good thing. It's not something they enjoy. Like, I don't know what he's talking about when he's sort of saying, hey, it isn't brutal because some of them died from natural causes instead of being murdered. It's still not a great thing, Francis. Like, seriously. I don't... It's very strange for him to say that. Like, maybe there are people that, die in their sleep completely peacefully. I grant you. But that is not the majority of people dying even from natural causes. Sorry, it isn't.
I've seen a lot of people pass on, and when they're conscious, they're always terrified, and they're often in a lot of pain.
Yes. So yeah, I don't, that's not an answer. It's just, if you're talking to an incredible minority, look, take it for example, my mother died, she had breast cancer, she died in a lot of pain, a lot of, upset, a lot of regret and fear and things like that. And you try to make it as peaceful as possible. You try to, soothe that person, but that's what it was like. My father just died in his sleep. Like, he peacefully passed away kind of thing. But that's not the majority. Maybe a while ago before medicine, it was just, you just upped and died. But, I would still venture that most people didn't just pass peacefully. I don't know, Ems. It's really weird. He's sort of taking this idea that, animals just die in their sleep constantly. It just, what are you talking about?
Right. If there were a God with any mercy, that wouldn't be what happens. It wouldn't, I don't know, there'd be some natural reaction that like calms you down and makes you be like you see in the movies where they say, it's okay, it's my time, that like relaxes you and reminds you this is part of the natural order, whatever. But evolution doesn't care what you feel when you go out because you're past selection,
Yep. And I mean, most animals, they don't die of old age causes like heart failure and stuff like that. Usually it's like the case that you're talking about. The predators can't hunt anymore and they starve to death. And the prey, well, they get picked off because they're old and weak. Like the lions will go for the very young or the very old because they are slower and can't get away. So, in the vast majority, it's not what he's saying it is. Just because humans, sort of get old and pass away from failures of their organs doesn't mean that happens to animals all the time. And I don't know, like, it's so wild that he sort of, he should know, as a biologist, he should know that animals usually don't die of natural causes. They get either murked by other predators or they starve or dehydrate to death. That's usually what happens.
Perhaps you will accuse me as a believer and then trying to rationalize that with the idea of why would God let that happen? And I do keep coming back to the idea that this feels like a reflection of God's interest in being a God of order, where once those laws are established, they're going to be followed. And at the very moment, at the Big Bang, the plan that would lead to us was in place, and it didn't have to be tweaked along the way the intelligent design people would say, in order to turn out right. It was perfect from the beginning with that outcome assured, and it wasn't blind, and it wasn't mindless. It was all kind of baked into the plan from the beginning. It may look
I'm curious about this
random to us. I don't think it's random to God.
What is the point of time if this is an all-powerful God who has a plan with a specific outcome that will definitely happen? What's the point of time? Why not create the end? Because nothing leading up to it actually matters.
Why not skip the trailers at the front? You know, the dinosaurs and all of that kind of stuff. Why not just bring it in from humans? Yeah. No, I'm totally with you. I really am. And I don't like this whole thing of, but it's also ordered. I get that it's got the appearance of order, that, you know, the bees need to have flowers, the flowers need the bees kind of thing. You know, like there is a relationship between things. But I don't think that was planned ahead of time. I think that evolution has a way of rewarding, or things will succeed if they work cooperatively. And so that gives rise to these ordered relationships, or they appear ordered. But I don't think that was planned ahead. You know, like, really.
No, it's exploitation of circumstance. It's the same way we do social things. We build on what already is. You know, like we take wheels already exist. So we say, hey, we've got wheels, and some dude over here invented an internal combustion engine. I'm going to build a horseless carriage. You know, we just build on what already is. Evolution does the same thing. There's flowers, there's already pollinators, but this one species of weird flying ant with stingers is like, you know what? I can probably do that better. And so I'm going to do that, you know? It just, we work with what is. We find things we can do and we exploit them.
There's so much to say, of course. So one thing I do want to point out at the outset here, when I speak to theists, and they say, look, I don't know why there's much suffering. But I can say that I believe in God, and I know that trust that there probably is one. I just don't know what it is. I say, okay, fine. But then if we rewind a moment to fine-tuning, and I say, look, this is a strange mystery. In the same way that for a Christian, suffering is a great mystery, but I'm sure there's an explanation even if I don't know what it is. When I'm confronted with the great mystery of fine-tuning, I think I reserve the right to say, look, I don't know what the scientific explanation of this.
Okay, so this is him, like Ember, using the same argument to say, hey, you know, there's this problem of the appearance of fine-tuning. We don't know why the constants are like this. I'm sure there's an answer out there somewhere. He can say that, sure. But I think that between the two, out of fine-tuning, where we only have one universe to observe, and, you know, it's got a problem with going back to the origin to see why the constants, you know, we can only look back so far, and then our physics breaks down. At the moment, we cannot tell why the constants are the way, or if they could be anything different. Whereas with evolution, we know a lot more about that. We've studied a ton on evolution. There are so many papers on it. There is so much investigation into it. And we're still learning stuff, sure. But sort of, you know, this good God thing is, you know, I think that there is a lot more leap of faith to sort of say, hey, there's a, you know, God had a plan. We just don't know what the plan is. You know, I think there's a...
I don't think we can even actually say that the constants are constant. We know they've been constant as far back as we can see, but everything we know about the moment of inflation seems to indicate that there was something all on the order of a phase change, like ice turning into water or water turning into ice, depending on your perspective. And it seems a virtual certainty that in that moment, as part of that process, what we consider to be constants changed from something else to what they are now. And so I don't know we can really say they're even constant.
So does that suggest, and you know way more about this than I do, granted, does that suggest that the constants could change to something else in the future? Like instead of heat death, they change and suddenly we have a big crunch?
I mean, it seems unlikely based on, well, okay. It's two questions. Will they change in the future? Maybe. We don't know for sure. It's one of those problems of induction. You know, we haven't seen them change, but we're also not entirely sure about that either. There is one potential solution to the strange way that we seem to be observing dark energy affecting the universe, in the way that sometimes in the past the universe seemed to be expanding faster than it is now, and at other temporal distances it seemed to be moving slower. Now, if it were just speeding up or slowing down, then we could work that into our model. But it's hiccuping, and we don't know why. And there's the possibility that the Hubble constant itself is not actually a constant.
Right. That's fascinating. So look, I think that out of the two, between cosmogony, the origin of the universe, and evolution, how extant or surviving life forms came to have the morphology and genetics that they have, I think that we understand a ton more about evolution than cosmogony. So I think that argument sort of, I would really push back against that with Francis Collins here. And I would really push back against the idea that evolution is ordered. Like, order, I mean, if you're using it in a sort of, thermodynamic sense, it has a meaning. If you're using it in like a colloquial sense, under either, I probably wouldn't say, hey, it's ordered kind of thing. I really don't think so. The way that it works is insanely messy to me. I don't know why you would say it's ordered. I would like for him to push up and say, in what way is it ordered? With sort of random mutations popping up, the process just, felling bad mutations at an astounding rate, and favoring the good ones to produce something that is more suited for its, like, how is that ordered exactly? I don't know.
Someday, right? I think, in other words, the cop out, but crudely, if we were treating it in that way, in the context of a discussion about it, can go both ways. So I just want to make that sort of put a pin in that. On the point of suffering, again, we run into this problem that, okay, broadly, maybe God has to bring about the world in a particular way. Maybe there has to be a kind of order. Maybe there has to be a kind of ecosystem. But it seems trivially true to me that an omnipotent deity could have organized the world so that there was not this kind of suffering. For example, we have animals who are obligate herbivores, right? They exist. We know that they can exist. We know that they do exist. He could have made all animals herbivores. It doesn't seem to be like...
Well, apparently he did it first.
Yes.
So, and that is a good thing to bring up in this discussion, because, the whole idea to a biologist, and especially a biologist that accepts, a long evolutionary process, the whole idea that, an animal like the eagle, and I brought this up in one of my ARC debates to, I think, Hovind, that it was vegetarian when its entire morphology is suited to eating meat, right? Like its digestion, its beak, its claws, why have talons for grasping prey on a vegetarian animal? And so his answer, famous hilariously, was that on the ark, the eagles ate hay. And I thought that was hilarious. Because the idea of an eagle eating hay with that beak is just funny to me. I'm sorry. It just is. Like, its entire system is set up to eat meat.
It just goes to show that Hovind hasn't been reading his damn Bible. It says right in the text that not only is he to bring either a pair of each or 7 of the clean and 7 pairs of the clean and 1 pair of the unclean, depending on which part of it you're reading, but that he's supposed to bring food for them.
Yeah.
Like the food that they eat. So
yes.
Yeah. Why would they need to eat hay?
Right. So, and there's a problem there because the Bible says that everything ate like fruits and vegetables in those days, in the days before the flood kind of thing.
I don't think it says that either.
I think it says that in Genesis.
But well, the reason that gets brought up, that's a theodicy, as I understand it. Maybe I did miss a part. It's entirely possible because that's not my field. But as I understand it, it's this idea that there couldn't have been meat eaters because there was no death before the fall. But the Bible doesn't even say there was no death before the fall. That's a thing that people have put on later, just like the serpent being Lucifer. It's later apologetics that get projected onto the text.
No. I'm right. I know I'm right. It says that yeah. So it's Genesis 1:29-30. It says, then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all of the beasts of the earth and all of the birds in the sky and all of the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. Right? Like, so it does specifically say at one point that in Genesis 1 that the animals only ate plants. Right. So presumably, unless some ultra fast evolution is at work, the eagles did eat plants.
Watermelons for everyone.
It's a little racist. But no, I get it. I get it. I totally get it. Like, it's weird, right? Like, the eagle's talons is for gripping the watermelon, and the beak is for opening up the watermelon or coconut or whatever. It's ridiculous, right? Like, evolution doesn't do that. It does not make these structures for, the structures evolve to suit what their food source is. And for eagles, that is, they are obligate carnivores. They absolutely need meat. And Alan with 2 formerly Freedom Bucks. Thank you, Alan. SDAs use this as a proof text. What's an SDA? Do I want to know what that is? I have a fear of acronyms since the Epstein files came out.
Society of Data Analysts. Silly dog adjutants.
According to the AI overview, it is specialist disability accommodation. Thanks, AI overview. You've been real. I don't know. Let me tell me what SDA means. SDAs. Standard deviant accountants.
We do enjoy deviants.
Silly damn atheists. I'm at a loss. Alan, let me know what an SDA is. I gotta know now. I gotta know. But thank you. Thanks for the super chat. I will respond as soon as I know what. Seventh Day Adventist. Thank you. Oh, thank you. They use it as a proof text. That does make more sense. I probably should have known that. Use this as a proof text. What, proof of the flood or something? Or proof of what? Use this as a proof text. Okay. Proof of what? Silly damn atheists, yeah.
In publishing, a proof text is like, I'm sure you've seen them from your wife. It's like the author's copy you get first, so you can check it over for typos and shit.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't. Look, Lynn, my wife writes, but she does not let me see anything she's doing or read anything she's doing until the very, very end stages when it's all been done. I'm not I'm not part of the process, and that's okay. That's all right. I don't have to be. I don't, because she's not really part of my process either when I, do a debate or something. So that's fine. It's cool. Yeah, proof that you should be a vegetarian as a Christian. Okay, got you.
Okay.
Right. So to sort of get back to what you're expected to be in the Garden of Eden, I suppose there's a certain kind of logic for that, right? Like, because if you were kicked out of the garden and you want back into the garden, eating meat will, is a sign of being fallen. It's an argument. I think if the Garden of Eden was real, it would be a good argument, but I don't, I think, yeah. Fibers and grains.
I see a problem with that, though.
What's
in
that?
order to be Christian, you have to believe that Jesus was the Son of God and was,
Correct.
sinless and lived the life without sin, right? If
Absolutely.
the eating the meat is the problem, then
Right.
Jesus eating lamb during the Passover would mean Jesus is breaking rules.
Well, that's true. That's true. Did Jesus eat lamb during the Passover?
Apparently.
Okay.
Let's see. It looks, I don't know. This is not my specialty. The Googles are telling me Luke 24:42. Let's see if I can find that. And also he had fish, although I understand some people argue that fish are actually vegetables.
Well, I don't know if the fish don't have the breath of life in them, I think. That's sort of one of the things that sort of makes clear. It's why they didn't need to go on the ark.
No, Luke 24:42 is about broiled fish, apparently. So where's the lamb? Jesus.
Who's got the lamb? Who's hidden the lamb? Come on now. Own up. I see you in chat. Where's the lamb, people? I thought Jesus was the Lamb of God. Is that cannibalism then? If he ate lamb and he's the Lamb of God, does that count as cannibalism?
Okay, apparently it's a conglomeration. It's reasoning, right?
Okay.
According to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and ostensibly John, I guess. Jesus was present with the disciples at the Last Supper was a Passover meal. Okay, right. I see. According to Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the Last Supper was a Passover meal. John says the Last Supper was something else. Whatever. He's at Passover. And so according to St. Paul, it is required to have lamb at Passover. So you have to put Paul together with the super gospels to get to lamb.
Okay.
The text doesn't actually say it, but
right. because in the original story they painted the door with lamb's blood, right? That was the sacrifice kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I would still stand on fish being meat because it's not a dairy product, but I understand that, bats is birds, fish are vegetables. Yeah. Whatever.
Fish are vegetable. They're obviously a variety of fungus. Come on now. Come on.
Yes.
They're fish, yeah, absolutely.
That would sort of affect the ecosystem in a pretty dramatic way. But if from the very beginning you had these self-replicating beings and then life who were still sort of competing with each other for habitats and still maybe killing each other, not for food, but for other reasons, but just were herbivores. You've eliminated an unfathomable amount of suffering. And when we say, like, okay, maybe I was being too dramatic when describing the brutality of life on Earth, like, I don't think that's true. David Attenborough once said, when people had criticized his documentaries for how much violence they included, he said, if you're upset by what we include, you should see what we leave on the cutting room floor. The natural world is filled with starvation and disease and predation. And just taking predation, when a lion kills a zebra, the zebra is usually too big to be killed instantly, so it will die over an agonizing death with its windpipe caught in the jaws of a lion. This could have been avoided. It doesn't seem to me that this kind of outcome is something that was necessary for producing the kind of ecosystem only through which could conscious human agents have come into existence.
Yeah, I mean, there's better examples than that. I mean, there's babies dying of malaria because they have mosquitoes transferring it. I mean, what's all that about? That seems completely unnecessary. But yeah, I mean, Alex has got this animal thing. I'm less concerned with the suffering of animals than I am with the suffering of humans. But it is a good argument. Like, I will grant it. It's a good argument. because we still do care about the suffering of animals. You know, we want to, if we do have meat, we want to put them down in a humane way, a way that doesn't cause suffering, or at least limits the suffering. That's what we want. And I don't see a problem with that. It's just, you know, I think there's better arguments of the problem of evil, such as, you know, viruses and fungus and, you know, horrible bacteria that eats your skin. You know, like what, like why God, why? Literally, you know, and under the paradigm of a undirected fight for survival, it makes perfect sense. It fits in exactly. But under the sort of auspices of a all-powerful, all-good, all-seeing God that wants humans to be the end product, why the flesh-eating bacteria is beyond me. It's beyond me.
Because the universe is created for the benefit of flesh-eating bacteria, but it needs a variety of flesh to eat to thrive and properly enjoy its existence. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously. Yeah, I think you've sold me on that one, actually.
Nailed it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the good question then is, why allow humans to invent antibacterials? You know, like it doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you look at it through the lens of competing survival, it does make a lot of sense that, you know, we invent antivirals, antibacterials, we fight against these things. That is our strive for life and survival. And, you know, the bacteria is doing the same. Let the best organism win, basically. And, you know, theists will go, oh, but that's evil. It causes, you know, suffering, and it's so horrible and so awful. And it's like, yeah. But it's not evil because there's no intentionality behind it. That bacteria isn't trying to harm us. That's not its intention, right? Like, it's not going out there and going, oh, I think I'll make humans suffer today. I think I'll, you know, that's my goal. No, it's just trying to survive.
We can't reason with it. We can't make a peace treaty with it. We can't talk it into trade negotiations. It'd be great if we could, but we can't. And so we're stuck in a position where it's kind of us or them.
Yeah. And that's, you know, why this system is what Alex is sort of getting back to. Why this system of just brutal survival. And it seems nonsensical when you sort of say, hey, an ordered God who fine-tuned the universe but made evolution brutal as possible with needless suffering happening, when he could have, presumably, an all-powerful God could have just created a universe without it.
Ta-da.
Yeah.
To have loved God. I'm not even sure why the material world would need to exist in the first place if we're supposed to be all.
Do you think all those observations that you're making are moral observations, though?
No, but that's a good question, because of course people will say to me, look, Alex, you don't believe in morality, or you don't have a grounding for morality, how can you make these moral criticisms? That's not what I'm doing. What I'm saying is, as Lincoln said of slavery, if this is not wrong, then nothing is wrong. I have no problem saying that, like, yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with predation and disease and starvation and all this kind of suffering. But that's an atheist paradigm. The atheist can say, well, there's nothing wrong with it, but we also expect it on our worldview. Right? The Christian says that this is a bad thing. We don't like that this is happening, but it is compatible with the existence of a good God. So I don't have to say that it's bad. I just have to say that I'm suspicious of the fact that if there were such a thing as objective goodness, that this would somehow be a part of that paradigm. This animal suffering is inexplicable to me. And again...
Yeah, and I want to touch on this and really reinforce this. Alex is making a really good presentation of what I said earlier. The problem of evil, the atheist can just say, hey, it's not evil. And that's sort of what he's pointing out. I think that subjectively, you know, and Alex can argue, well, I think it is bad. Now, Alex, he's a moral emotivist, which means that he doesn't think that morals exist. He just thinks that reactions to stimuli exist and those form the base of our morality. I would disagree with Alex on this one. I think that we don't just go this thing, which is what he's saying. Like, so a moral emotivist, they don't actually have morals. They just go, suffering, bad. I get a bad feeling about that. It's like suffering, yuck, is basically where his stance is, right? Like, he doesn't like it. And that forms the basis of his morals. But I would argue that there are things that we have an emotive response to but still feel the need to do anyway. Like, for instance, amputations, right?
Ooh.
Nobody looks at amputations and goes, oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, let's do it. That's a great thing. Nobody does that. Everyone is like, amputations, yuck. Everybody, including the doctor doing it. But I think that it is the outcome, the reasonable outcome of it, that it may save somebody's life. And we say that is worth that emotive response in order to achieve that goal. So I would disagree with Alex on this one. I think that a lot of people's morals flow from emotivism. I wouldn't contend with that. A lot of people go through life not thinking in consequentialism, but rather, this thing, yuck. A lot of people go through and go, homosexuality, yuck. And so it's immoral to them.
Fear and disgust.
And it's a bad, right, it's a bad way to evaluate morality to me. I think we want to go, well, is homosexuality harmful? Does it cause unnecessary harm, or does it create value or good in society? Yeah, it does. So, that's why I'm on board with it. I think more people who love each other and care for each other and have a community, and all of these things outweigh any tiny risks that you're doing, kind of thing, that you're trying to stack against it.
So
I think that's really good.
more people should be gay, and therefore be gay, do crimes.
Well, I didn't say gay. I said being in a loving relationship and stuff like that. Be gay, do crimes. Sure, absolutely. Look, it's fine. It's fine. Look, if we had an overpopulation problem, which we may do, there's a lot of a lot of people do. I would say, hey, it's better if more people were gay, right? Like, having less children is probably a good idea if we're overpopulated. However, I will say that something like that is not up to overpopulation, or what we decided is that comes from you're born with a attraction to the opposite or same sex or both, or sometimes everything. We don't really choose that. So, but what I'm saying is that that's a net benefit, in my opinion. So I think that I get what he's saying. A lot of people do this. They just go, what's yuck? What do I like? And that's moral and immoral. And I really do believe that isn't the best way to look at morality or immorality. I really don't think so.
Yeah, it's
but
motivated reasoning. It's saying what I feel is right.
Right.
And I don't have to question it ever.
Well, so I don't have a problem. So there's two uses of morality. We use morality descriptively to say, hey, the morals of, the people of Japan have different morals than me, kind of thing, like cultural stuff, or a Christian will have different morals than I do. We use it descriptively all the time. But when it comes to prescriptions, like if I say, hey, Ember, you ought to wear hats because they look good on you, kind of thing.
Agree.
When we're talking well, if I'm saying like, Ember's morality includes hat wearing, it's descriptive. If I say Ember ought to wear hats, kind of thing, that's prescriptive. It's saying what she ought to do, right? Like what should happen in the future. So when we're talking about that, we're talking about a normative morality, like what should be the case, like what all people would agree to if they're rational, right? So if we say murder is wrong, we should not murder, it's a normative description. It's basically what ought to be the case, what people should do. So if using it descriptively, moral emotivism, I agree. A lot of people's morality is just based on totally understand it. But if you're talking about it in a normative sense, I think that consequentialism that is based upon reasonable expectations of outcome is a better way to apply a moral system. I disagree with Alex O'Connor. You feel free to throw rocks, tomatoes, or anything in the chat that you wish.
Well, Alex, we really like the way you do a lot of your stuff, but of course we're not all going to agree on everything. And if you want to debate Mark over this, I'm sure he could be talked into it. Yeah.
I could, I would be happy to debate over this. I absolutely happy to debate. I did a morality debate recently. It was very good. I really enjoyed it. Big shout out to Objective Ethics, who is awesome. And Did the debate. Yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it. I really did. So yeah.
If we say that, well, God had to create a balanced ecosystem that followed particular laws, it seems like that God simply had to use the process of animals tearing each other to shreds for billions of years and starving and dying in confused agony for billions of years. And that's the only possible way that we could have brought about human life. To be honest, the amount of suffering that's happened on this planet, if that really were the only way to bring about intelligence, even worth it.
I mean,
if that's the only way to bring about, it's not worth it. I disagree. I disagree. I think that, you know, when you're saying worth it, I don't. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't think that's a question that any person could answer, because it puts you as kind of in a judge of the universe position. You would have to have the knowledge of a God to make that kind of evaluation, to say, I understand you, my child, or my billions of children, or my trillions of species children. You have suffered, you have died in agony over the span of billions of years, and it's most tragic. But look, Mark and Ember exist, and they're making fun of a theist on YouTube. Like, how
really making fun?
Yes, I
must admit, I make fun of young Earth creationists, but that is a whole nother story than Francis Collins here. Like, that is absurd to me.
Yes. I very much make it a silly position, but I can see it going the other way too. Like, when we really strongly care about someone to the point that we value their existence so highly that, like, with children are perhaps the easiest to come to mind, but a spouse, a good friend, a beloved relative, like, there's a bunch of different people who could meet this category where you might think all of it, thousands of generations of striving and suffering and dying just to make it possible for that person to exist, still worth it.
Yeah.
Even if you personally had to die all those deaths to get to today, you know?
Yeah. And I do think with struggle and hardship, we do try to find the good in it, you know, like the slight sliver of good with anything that happens, because there always is something to be found. However, I will say, like, this sort of fatalism that O'Connor's sort of saying, I wonder if he is an antinatalist. Like, I really do, or at least a personal antinatalist. He won't have children. There is an argument to be made. I don't subscribe to it myself, but there is an argument to be made that nobody consented to be born. This is an antinatalist position, that you're forcing life upon people that did not choose it for themselves, kind of thing. But I think that, you know, I think that the experience of life is always kind of, or almost always, worth it, rather than having nothing. I think that you are, you know, I think that there's always moments in life that are worth the. I mean, I remember reading a book called, like, A Fortunate Life, right? And this guy had, like, the most brutal upbringing. With his dad was a monster, and he had the most horrible time, and, like, his entire life was terrible. Like, everything that could have gone wrong happened to him. He was like the unluckiest person in the history of the world. And he described it as a fortunate life. He could still keep positive for all of the tiny moments in his life that were so much more beautiful because of the horrors he'd experienced. And, you know, I think that there is something to be said about, and that does not, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, hey, these horrible things that are happening are good. Definitely not. But when we do get to the points of light in our lives, they're so much more brighter because of what we had to endure to get to them. That's not saying that the enduring those horrible things are good. It's just enjoy those bright moments all you can, because life is hard. I disagree. I think it's worth it. I think that it's worth it.
I tend to think so too. I had a similar experience. In fact, I read a book called A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich in high school, and it's similar. Ivan is a prisoner in the Soviet gulags in Siberia.
Oof, yeah, okay, fair enough.
It's pretty brutal, and we get to follow him through a day of his life. And even though he reports on the bitter cold and how, you know, the hard labor and the living conditions and the crappy food and so forth, he focuses on the good things, like when the ray of sunshine peeks through the clouds, or a moment's rest to pause and reflect. And you know, the reason this particular day is because one of the other prisoners gets a care package from a family member, and they have sort of an association within this particular gulag, you know, apes together strong kind of thing. Yep. And so whenever anybody gets a care package, they all share. And so, you know, his part of that care package that's given to him is a cookie. And so he gets to delight in having a fucking cookie. And I'm like, reading it, I'm just thinking to myself, to take so much delight from something that I, then a high school student, take for granted, the accessibility of freaking cookies. I can go to any grocery store and for a couple of bucks get a whole box of them. And here he is. It's a peak experience. It's the highlight of his fucking day. Right. I'm like, maybe there's something to this. I don't think it's necessarily that we require suffering to have peak experiences. It's more that the way we're going about living our lives, taking good things for granted because we're so hyper-focused on our constant anxieties and our worries. That's not what humans are really designed for. When you are in a state of suffering, it shifts your perspective. The anxieties don't fucking matter because you've got real life and death to handle every day, you know?
And that's not great. Don't get me wrong. That's not great. But, you know, and I think mindfulness is really good. Sort of, you know, eating things with an awareness without focusing on your anxieties or the future or the past or anything, and just sort of enjoying stuff for what it is very cathartic and very, very good to do. Yeah, I highly recommend mindfulness. Highly recommend. As sort of a tool for appreciating the beautiful things around us, while sort of putting away those you know, clamoring thoughts that we have.
Hell yeah. As I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt who said that worry does not solve the problems of tomorrow. All it does is rob today of its joys.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. But however, we do need to plan ahead, you know. It's just, well, yeah, it's a fine line, you know. It is a fine line. Yeah, I was just looking up that book. It's a West Australian book, so you may not have heard of it. It's called A Fortunate Life. Like, his dad was a drover who literally whipped him, and he went to, like, he got lost while like doing droving, which is moving sheep around, and almost died, and like was rescued and went to Gallipoli, World War One. You know, lost all of his friends, and he was really, really an amazing book. Amazing book.
Oh shit, it's an autobiography.
Yeah. Yeah, he called himself his own life A Fortunate Life because he had all these experiences. Yeah. Like, that's him talking about his own life. Even though, like, you read it and it is a brutal, horrible life that he had, but like you say, he pays attention to the wonderful things that happened. Really incredible.
Hell yeah.
Saying, I think it's not one that I find it easy to dismiss. Polkinghorne, the Anglican priest, who is also a physicist, writes about this and has designated this something he calls physical evil, that it is evil of a sort, but it is a consequence of physical laws. An earthquake that kills animals and people because of tectonic plates that are moving.
Wait. Hold it. Hold the phone there. You're saying it's a physical evil because it is a consequence of the natural laws, which presumably are a consequence of those constants you're talking about putting in place. right? Like, because everything flows from, determined from the plan that God had when he set it up. So how is that not God intending for that to happen? Like, how does that remove it? Why is it a physical evil? I don't understand. Like, I still think of it as, well, yeah, but the origin is spiritual. If the origin is God, who made the universe, who made the constants, who made the natural laws that cause the earthquakes to happen, then when you go down the chain of causation, you eventually come to God, which is a spiritual being, right? So you're sort of saying, hey, it's a physical evil, so it's, it's not God being evil, it's just the world he made. But he made it to have that evil, yet it doesn't get you out of it, Francis. Glass is half full type of mentality. Yeah, optimistic. Look, I do have a joke that I make often. It's a optimist thinks the glass is half full, a pessimist thinks that the glass is half empty, and an engineer thinks that the glass is twice as big as it needs to be. And I'm definitely in the engineer category. Definitely.
Around that are part of the way in which the laws of physics apply to our planet. Many of those were innocent people and animals, but they died anyway. That, in his description as a physicist, once again, sort of fits this. It all comes with the package. And unless you want God to start intervening at every step along the way.
Okay, so what Alex is going to do here is attack that idea of it comes with the package. Why, for a God, when you're designing a world, does anything have to come with the package? Right? Like, why can't you design a world where, like he said, all the animals eat plants? And presumably he did at one point. Like, and then there was the fall. Let's get away from the idea that God is punishing the descendants. And the reason why he's using animals is very, very specific here. It's so that if he says, hey, Adam and Eve sinned, all of their descendants are being punished, which is ludicrous. We shouldn't punish the descendants of people for the mistakes that their parents made, right? Like, we shouldn't punish them for that, because that is insane. Your idea that animals are being punished for what humans did is crazy. Like, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because the animals didn't do it. Their descendants didn't do anything. They were created before the humans, so they couldn't possibly, have given rise to humans. But, so in order for him to say, if he sort of says, oh, well, humans deserve this as punishment, number one, that is horrific for a start. Number two, why should we fight against the just punishment that we're receiving? And it gets into later arguments, but I really think he's going to attack, well, why does it come with this additional baggage? Why does God have to bow to, oh, well, that comes with the package? Like, if I design it this way, it has to have this thing in it. Why? He's not saying why, he's just saying, I really feel like he's getting to God works in mysterious ways. And that's not an answer.
Is reasons that we can't possibly understand. I mean, maybe that's even true if you can. But it's still a terrible argument. Like, especially when you're presupposing profits. But never mind.
Yes. Yeah.
Then it's unavoidable, and it must mean that God cared so much for the advent of people like us that could actually have a conversation like this about God, that it seemed in God's judgment worth it. You don't think it's worth it. That means you're disagreeing with my God, so we can decide whether he would like to enter the conversation.
Yeah, but also I don't know if that would be particularly consoling to the deer with its leg trapped under a fallen branch and dying of starvation with a broken leg, and you say to it, well, look, I know that you're suffering, but you have to understand all of this is in the service so that one day Francis Collins and Alex O'Connor can have an intelligent conversation about God's existence.
Appreciate that. Of course, if the deer had not been hurt in some predatory way, would had die eventually, and probably an unpleasant experience either way. Are you trying to argue there shouldn't be death?
No, it's not death that I see as the problem, it's suffering. And in fact, a moment ago when you said that animals don't fear their mortality, I completely agree. But I do think that they experience fear and anxiety about predators.
In the acute.
And, sorry?
In the acute moment.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So that's the kind of fear that I was talking about.
Well, I don't think just in the acute moment. I think that, most animals hear a noise and they have a fear response. An unusual noise or a rustle, they do have anxiety responses from random noises. I don't think it's just sort of acute. Sure, but he's sort of suggesting that, the animals are just happy as until they unless a lion jumps out at them, and I don't think that's the case. I think that a lot of animals are constantly hungry, like constantly. They live their lives without getting enough food because it's, in the wild, it is a equation that has to be met. That is the amount of energy you produce catching your food or finding your food or foraging your food with the amount of energy that food gives you. And usually a lot of animals come up short, right? Like they literally can't find enough food, or they can't find enough water and things like that. That's without, humans doing horrible things or other animals doing horrible things. And, that impulse to survive produces like a fear response. You've got to find food. It drives them for obvious reasons. Obvious to the evolutionary biologists' reasons. I don't see this as a get out of jail free card. It seems like Francis Collins, who ran the Human Genome Project, just hasn't seen a wildlife documentary in his life.
Yeah, like, why do you need any selection pressure at all if you have someone in charge of the controls?
Well, I think that's what Alex is pushing back on.
Yeah.
But also, his description of an animal's life, like, without civilization, without some kind of societal structure, like if you get solitary predators and solitary animals that just, meet up with others to breed, their lives are usually very short, nasty, and brutal. And the same is true of humans. Usually their lives are very brutal when they don't have civilization. So, this whole idea of, well, only acutely they feel fear if they're being attacked and that's it. I don't think so. I think that they have things driving them that is using a, fear or hunger or some form of suffering to drive them. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Watch a documentary, and understand, like David Attenborough when he said, like, if you think lions mauling zebras is gross and horrific, you don't know what we left on the cutting room floor. Because we see some brutal stuff. I mean, we see chimpanzees absolutely brutalize other monkeys, right? They hunt monkeys. But they don't hunt them as in they just chase after them. No, they're strategic and plotting. They will drive the monkeys into an ambush kind of thing. So they will chase them and drive them into an ambush where other apes, like the amount of fear they would be experiencing. And then, they eat them. And sometimes these monkeys are alive when they eat them and conscious and screaming while they're being eaten. This is something that happens. And that's our closest relative. And Francis Collins should know that.
You would think.
You would think. Yeah, so, I like, imagine that monkey, like what it's going through, being eaten by a chimpanzee who has corralled it through, driving it and making it scared into an ambush by other chimpanzees, grabbed it, and started to literally eat it alive. Horrific, brutal, and apparently all God's plan.
All according to plan.
Yeah.
Death is not the problem for me, especially when we're considering the possibility of a Christian paradigm where death is just the beginning rather than the end. Of course, no problem at all.
But you want every animal to have a soft, sweet death.
Well, if possible, then yes. But maybe that's not possible. What I do think is possible is not having a system which is designed from the ground up to require the miserable, brutal death in order to progress the evolution of the species. That's what I think is possible. It might be that animals still suffer. I totally understand.
I can see how that wouldn't be the case.
Quite, like suffering is a natural result of creating a world in which there are free agents living in a material world. Of course, there are questions about why that paradigm needs to be created in the first place. But sure, problem of evil is not so much about the existence of evil per se, but its sheer depth, the level. That there are so many ways conceivably that God could reduce the suffering that's baked into the system. He might not need to intervene in particular cases.
Sure.
Because I understand if this particular animal is about suffering and God sort of comes down from the heavens and protects him, then he's playing favorites. And that just is a totally unfeasible situation. And he couldn't do that every time. But when it's baked into the system, and it seems like that little tweak, well, let's make the animals herbivores, or let's have the teeth of predators contain a kind of natural anesthetic, so that when they sort of eat the prey, the prey are sort of, you know what I mean? Like, just so many conceivable ways.
Those are also supernatural interventions, because they would not happen by natural process.
Well, unless it was in the same way that there are natural, they're all kind of natural things which have effects on our lives. Like, there are plants that give us hallucinogenic experiences and stuff. Like, it doesn't seem crazy to me to think that they could have evolved saliva in a lion that has anesthetic properties. That doesn't seem like a supernatural intervention in that case.
Because then that means that there would be some other pressure than advantage to the lion. It may not be at all to the advantage to the lion to have
Yeah, I don't know why that wouldn't be logically possible. So I think that sort of Francis Collins' lack of philosophical sort of background is really coming up here, because when you're claiming an omnipotent or even a maximally powerful God, right, you're kind of claiming a God that can do literally anything except that which is not logically possible. So he can make it so, lions have an anesthetic saliva that when they bite on a leopard, it just falls into a trance and is high and has a peaceful death. He's not wrong. That's not logically impossible, right? So the problem comes from this tri-omni God. All they need to do is just drop the omnipotence and say, hey, God is powerful but has to work within certain constraints. But that's a problem then, because where do those constraints come from? Right? Like, if you're claiming that God made the universe and made everything in it, then where do the constraints come from?
Yeah, is there an even more powerful God shackling him or whatever? But also, right. I take issue with the way Francis phrased that as, well, you're asking for supernatural interventions. A, so what if they were? Like, but B, if it happened every time, it wouldn't be a supernatural intervention. Correct. It would just be how nature works, you know? But it seems like nature and evolution specifically is set up to maximize suffering. I mean, it's not all suffering all the time, but it seems like there's as much suffering as could reasonably crammed in there on the biological level. I mean,
no, I don't think so. I think because, I mean, we are evolved to avoid suffering. We are compelled to avoid pain and suffering. Like, pain is a response of damage to our meat suits, basically, or damage in some way to us, right? Like, that is something we want to avoid because that leads to death, basically. But I think we try to avoid suffering as much as we can. I think that is a feature of evolution as well. And it is the striving of, I mean, it's not that we're avoiding suffering, it's that we're avoiding damage, basically, or unpleasant things that are detrimental to us. We want to avoid that in evolution. So I don't think it's evolution is set up to maximize suffering. I don't think it's set up at all. I think that just there is in the realms of survival, we strive to not suffer because suffering is losing that battle of survival. Like, it's set up so that suffering is us losing the survival battle. And, obviously there's things that, that life wants us to do that gives us, good feelings for, like the sex drive, for instance, like that is, presumably in some way pleasant for everybody, and we're set up to do that kind of thing, however that may be. So I really don't think, I don't think it's set up at all. I think just, the ones to survive are the ones that avoid suffering and, go towards pleasures like eating and drinking and sex and things like that. I think they're just the ones that survive.
Emergent properties.
Yeah.
The systems we observe are a function of underlying component. It's sort of like how cellular expression, it isn't consciously controlled by the DNA. It's just the consequence of systems upon systems upon systems, and that's how they manifest.
Yep, absolutely. I don't know. But then again, you do have wild things like, ethanol is a poison, but we really enjoy getting drunk. Actually, all animals enjoy getting drunk. If you've ever seen a documentary about the Amarula tree, which drops its fruit and it ferments on the ground. Like if you want to see something to make you laugh, watch that and see a drunk giraffe is hilarious. Like just hilarious. It is really funny.
Sort of anesthetic in its jaws, that may actually be a disadvantage. So if you're once going to accept the fact that it's an ordered universe and life is going to evolve according to that, then it's going to evolve according to that, no matter whether it feels like I wouldn't have done it that way because of suffering.
Do you feel the same about the herbivore example? And these are some crude examples, but like the herbivore example.
I hadn't really thought about it. It's hard for me to think how God could sort of step in and make sure that the evolution of those genomes avoided a pathway that led to a carnivore. That does seem like another one of those supernatural interventions that, for what I can see, is a very strong reason God decided not to interfere.
I mean, it's already borderline there, right? Like, it's the same reason we don't have the ability to fly. It's not a supernatural intervention. It's the way the rules are set up, and we're very nearly there with carnivores. Like we were talking about earlier, lions are all the big cats are often on the edge of starvation because of the extreme difficulty in getting enough nutrients. The reason nothing is a predator on lions is because there's just no caloric efficiency there. Top level predators like that are only 5% calorically efficient. There's a razor thin margin. So if it were just slightly less efficient to be a carnivore, there wouldn't be carnivores.
Right. And why couldn't you just make plants more efficient at producing energy? Like, just much more efficient. I don't get the problem with that. That's not logically impossible. I don't know. It's kind of like he's sort of like, well, God could change things, but he set these up. He's really going for a deist perspective where God just set up all the constants and then step back and just let it all occur. Like, let her rip, like however it goes kind of thing. But the problem with that is then that precludes an omnibenevolent God, because an omnibenevolent God would go, well, I've got to have good as being the outcome. I've got to have, and wouldn't send Jesus, quite frankly. Like, why would you send Jesus if you're just letting her rip? I don't know why that is. It's very strange.
It is. It's like he wants to, for special pleading reasons, there needs to be exactly one supernatural intervention, and that's it.
Fair enough.
Here with, we can come to miracles later on about things that God chose to do to lift those rules in very special circumstances, those great ganglions of history, as Lewis calls them, had a message to send.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these questions...
So he's not arguing for one supernatural intervention. He's arguing for miracles. He's saying there are fuck tons of supernatural interventions, but they're very specific cases for very specific reasons. What are you doing, Francis? What are you doing?
I don't know. It's like, it's very strange because Christians claim that God wants you to know he exists and have a personal relationship with you. And then when you sort of say, I've done nothing to see that a God is real, they're like, well, you expect a miracle. And my response is, well, that would help a lot, actually. If something completely inexplicable by my understanding of the world occurred, it would definitely be good evidence, right? It definitely would be, but that never happens. But they're like, oh, well, you expect a miracle. No, I don't expect it. But if I sort of ask somebody to prove, like if I ask a person who claims they're from Sweden to exist, usually they will do something to make me think they exist. There won't just be dead silence. I don't know why a God is sort of limited. Like somebody said, like a God could go on TV tomorrow once a year to say, hey, I'm still here and check out the miracle. And it would be broadcast all around the world and no one would be in doubt. But he doesn't.
Yeah, this year it will rain Skittles. Behold my power and fear me. Or whatever.
Right. And presumably for an omnipotent God, that would be trivial. So I think, as I said earlier, I think it's really showing that Francis Collins hasn't really delved into the God of classical theism, the omnipotent, omnibenevolent, and omniscient God that could do anything, knows what people would need, presumably wants them to know that he exists, and yet does nothing.
It's pretty weird. Even when we do get miracles, there's no calling card. I mean, alleged miracles, whatever. There's never a calling card. Like, unless it's a manifestation of the Virgin Mary in a piece of toast. When a person's cancer does go away in a way that medical science can't explain, or a person has a near-death experience wherein they see where their lost car keys are and then they find them when they get home, whatever it is, there's never a connection to a specific deity that humans have already identified, or even a new one. Nobody, as far as I've been able to determine across all of history, has ever had their stage 4 cancer vanish without a trace and go, this is because of Shaman Utek, who is the new god none of you have ever heard of, but I know he's real because he just cured me. Never happens. Very strange.
Yeah, very, very well. I'm just going to claim all future unclaimed miracles are mine from now on. All right, I'm going to claim them all, especially if they're a bald man on toast. I know there's a lot of bald men out there, but that is mine. Okay, I'm claiming it right now.
I thought it was Mr. Clean on my toast.
Damn it! He got in first, didn't he? He got in first. Damn it! I always miss my chance. I'm always redirecting people into a closing stream and stuff. It's terrible. All right, I gotta get better at claiming things early. Damn it! I'm off to the patent office right now.
That you're asking, then you can look at philosophy, and then people obviously look to more religions to try to answer some of these questions. And so even when I think about the word suffering that keeps coming up over and over and over again, the next thing we were talking about was the resurrection of Jesus, because the Christian story at least would propose, that there is a reason, even though we don't fully know the reason why these things are being allowed, but that God subjected himself to that same suffering, and that was seen with Jesus on the cross. And so let's talk about the resurrection a little bit.
Is the moderator, or this? I know it's not a debate, but like presumably he's the moderator because these are the two main people. Is he kind of just trying to back up Francis here? Like, is he just coming in for Mr. Collins saying, hey, we don't know why suffering occurs, but he suffered as well. Jesus suffered on the cross. I don't, like, in comparison to like animals suffering all their lives and stuff, I don't really see, I mean, God didn't really put himself through the suffering of, animals in the wild, right? He had a group of guys going around singing his praises and stuff, and then died on the cross for 3 days and was resurrected. I mean, it wasn't, I don't know. I just don't think it equates to the same thing.
No, I don't think so either. I don't know who this moderator is or what his bias in this case might be. I'm not familiar with the fella, but it seems to me most of his questions seem to be geared towards prompting the conversation in a certain direction. Like what he's saying right now could be taken to be like, hey, Francis, maybe you should talk about Jesus a little more, since that's specifically what you believe.
Well, I think there is a real Well, I mean, the channel's called the Mighty Pursuit Podcast, so I've got some suspicions on its sort of alignment along the atheist-theist spectrum here. Maybe Mighty Pursuit. Okay, maybe not. It doesn't mention God anywhere in the description, so that's a good sign. Mighty Pursuit is when it all connects, mind, body, and spirit. Long-form conversations with scientists, celebrities, spiritual thinkers. Damn, all right. So scientists, celebrities, spiritual thinkers, definitely there is an Epstein list there, and everyday people, which is not. Okay. Okay. Oof. Yeah, I had to make that joke. Is it too soon? Is it too soon?
No, I think it should be early and often. We should never let anyone forget about that nonsense.
Right. And look, I'm up for anybody telling me what to do now with the information we've gotten, but you know, so I don't know. It does seem like he's bringing it up to tie back into the whole Jesus thing, which, you know, there's an opportunity there, because if evolution is true, which Francis Collins believes, there's no real reason to believe that Adam and Eve were a thing. In fact, it kind of precludes it, right? Like, it definitely didn't make Adam and Eve, which kind of means that Eden is out the window, which means that the fall is out the window, which means why do you need Jesus? Right? Like, because Jesus came along because humanity was fallen and needed to be saved. If there is no fall, presumably there's no saving needed. Like, so why are we being punished for Adam and Eve's transgression if Adam and Eve weren't a thing? And hey, I'd be good to hear from. I mean, I've heard way different responses, but let's see what Francis Collins has got to say. That's if, I mean, I can't imagine Alex won't bring that up. He's too astute not to.
How that intersects with, so why do you find the resurrection to be compelling as something that actually happened in human history? Like, what led you to that conclusion?
Well, there's a lot of records that one can look at, and those who are inclined to pick.
Is there a lot of records of Jesus being crucified?
No.
I don't think there is. I think there's the Gospels. And, you know, obviously Paul's writing suggests it, but okay, maybe. But, you know, he's not asking why you believe Jesus was crucified. He's asking why you believe he rose from the dead. That's what he's asking.
Mm-hmm.
Each one of them can probably do so, but certainly the records of the New Testament of Jesus' life and the teachings that he put forward in that very short period of time where we have that information seem, for the most part, pretty reliable on the basis of multiple.
Do they? I hate to point this out, but, you know, there's the long ending of Mark that was, well, we almost know that was certainly added later. Like, is it reliable? I mean, don't get me wrong. I have no doubt that parts are reliable, like when they're describing places and perhaps people. Like, we know that Pontius Pilate was the overseer of that area. Like, we know that, right? Like, that has been confirmed through all kinds of things. But do we know that, you know, okay, wild.
Individuals writing down very similar findings. And the fact crucified seems to fit quite well with practices that were going on at the time. I think it's pretty hard to say Jesus was a myth. That's what.
Well, that's like saying Spider-Man went out and visited, you know, what are those stores called in New York that's like a corner store kind of thing? I can't remember what they're exclusive to New York. I can't remember what they're called.
Dwayne Reed?
Sorry?
Dwayne Reed?
Who's Dwayne Reed?
The name of a store that's on literally every block in Manhattan.
Oh, no. It's like a deli kind of thing.
Like a chain or like a type of store?
No, it's a type of store. Come on, somebody help me out. Someone has to be American in this.
Some people are saying bodega?
Bodega, yeah, right. Okay, thank you. It's like, thank you, a bodega, right? Like it's
to New York? I didn't think they were.
Oh, well, the only context I've heard about it
I'm in New York.
is in New. Oh, really? Oh, okay, got you. They're definitely not bodega. Okay. Popularized in New York City by Puerto Rican and Cuban communities, they serve as a central community. Okay, maybe they're outside. Yeah. Okay. We have a bodega restaurant in WA. Are you serious? What the? All right, that's weird. That's weird. And anyway, bodega. Thank you. So it's like saying, well, Spider-Man. It said in the comic, Spider-Man went to a bodega, right? And those were around at the time. We knew that. So Spider-Man is real. That's the problem we're doing here, right? Like saying, hey, it says that Jesus was crucified and that was something that was happening at the time. Just because that was happening at the time doesn't necessarily mean that all of the events took place that they're talking about. And again, sorry, go ahead.
What's worse is that while we say, oh yeah, but Spider-Man comic book, whatever, we find references to Spider-Man in comic books. We find references to real people that we can confirm externally in the comic book. So there's crossover in that direction. But also we see references to Spider-Man in other media at the contemporary age. Like if archaeologists come across this YouTube channel, this recording in the future, they're going to see us talking about Spider-Man in the transcript, and they'll be like, aha, Spider-Man existed outside of the book. Contemporary references. That doesn't exist for Jesus.
Right.
I thought when I was growing up, but I think the evidence for Jesus' literal historical existence,
that seems to be accepted.
Seems pretty much as convincing as, the same of Julius Caesar. And the fact that
I mean, well, look, I get the mythicist position, and I have issues with the mythicist positions of some people that say, oh, but if you can disprove Jesus even lived, then you don't even have to go on to the resurrection. I think that's a wrong line of logic. It's sort of saying, hey, wouldn't it be convenient for our arguments? Like that's not logical. That's not a way to argue. That's not
clearly to try to get around the argument, though. I think it's showing that the pro-resurrection position has a much heavier burden than they often are willing to admit to. Because if you can't even demonstrate your guy definitely existed, then magic further downstream is a bit more of a reach. But also it goes into the culture at the time, right? We can learn a lot about, because it's not just Christianity, right? Like there's a similar movement in Islam where they're contending that Muhammad never really existed, and in Judaism that Abraham never really existed.
Moses,
and other cultures. And it seems like the more you explore this issue, and I'm getting this from David Fitzgerald, so whatever you feel about him, I guess put an asterisk on it, but it seems like every mythology, they all are based on stuff made up after the fact and retroactively inserted into history.
Well, I would just go with sort of what biblical scholars say, because I don't feel like I have enough of a grasp on it to really decide. And most biblical scholars, there's kind of a consensus that Jesus was an itinerant rabbi that roamed around. And to me, it's not a big issue, right? It's not a big deal.
Claim. Yeah.
Right. It's just, and what they're sort of saying is, hey, we've got the same level of evidence for Jesus as Julius Caesar. I don't think that's entirely true. I don't think that's comparable. Yeah, I know. But even if we did, right, I get what they're saying, that some historical figures we believe existed just based on limited information about them. And I kind of agree, like that, hey, we base, Boudica, for instance, on, sort of information that we get from one source, which is the Romans kind of thing, that she existed. Now, how do we know she wasn't made up as a sort of fear, sort of, oh, watch out for the woman from the Celts who was going to, come through with chariots? We don't know for sure, right? But there's enough evidence to say, hey, she almost certainly existed, right? A person. But now, is all of the things credited to her true? Probably not. No. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, did a person with that general name, probably Joshua. Yeshua, exist at that time, and most biblical scholars, or almost all biblical scholars, will say yes. But there's no reason to think that we cannot confirm that these miracles occurred or that he rose from the dead or anything like it. So to me, it's not a pertinent question to what I am usually discussing, because usually what I am discussing is, is there a God, basically, or was Jesus God, or was this figure in some way a supernatural event? If you think that records of someone existing and stories that they did miracles, then you've got to apply the same logic to Muhammad, and Muhammad's prophet of God and supernatural as well, which they won't do. So to me, it's not a valid question. I just go with what the consensus of biblical scholars. That might change in the future. I am not qualified enough to determine whether the personage Jesus lived or not. I really am not. So I just go with the
typical conversations. It doesn't really make that much difference to me, because it's such a pedestrian claim. It's like saying St. Paul had a dog. Cool. Jesus lived, Jesus died. Great. Now what?
Yeah. Yeah.
He was put to death on a cross also seems entirely supportable by the data that we have from various sources. And before we get to the resurrection part, the fact that he did die on the cross, an unimaginably painful and difficult way to have one's life ended, is something that of the Christian faith I find particularly helpful.
Well, a lot of people died on crosses, sir. A lot of people did. That's the thing. And what's even weirder about the Christian apologetics surrounding them basically saying, well, he didn't expect to die on the cross, which makes it more believable, which is weird, right? Like, that's strange. Because if you think you are God or getting messages from God, you think he would have filled you in ahead of time. Not on the day where you're in the garden going, oh God, why have you forsaken me? And his followers certainly didn't expect that to happen. They thought he would, in his life, bring about the kingdom of heaven, right? So it was a surprise to them. So which is more likely, that a supernatural guy rose from the dead, or his followers, when their apocalyptic cult just had their leader up and die on them, that they claim that he rose from the dead and will carry on his work? Sans body.
Magic body. Magic body with holes in it. All right, I'm getting weird about it, but it is a solid point. Like, whether you're the Son of God or the incarnation of God or a prophet with a direct line to God, how could you not see that coming?
Especially because, it's your plan to begin with.
Right.
He must have got a mind wipe coming to Earth. I don't know how that works. Okay, I don't know how that works. But, being made into flesh, into man, he got a mind wipe that he planned this stuff from the start. It's
the incarnation process. It relying on physical proteins for memory engrams. It doesn't let you encode spiritual knowledge as a newborn.
But I do want to point out just quickly that this is a dodge. I'm sorry, Francis, this is a dodge, because you're not addressing the resurrection, you're addressing the crucifixion, which even if God, even if Jesus did live at that time, or Yeshua or whatever he was called, lived at that time, a rabble rouser who sort of bucked authority being crucified by the Romans is not a significant thing. It's not. I'm sorry, it's not.
It was kind of their thing.
When I'm struggling with suffering.
Sorry?
I said it was kind of their thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
I mean,
it varies
dissenters
from
and
era
things.
to era,
Yeah.
but anybody who disrupted the order of the empire had a pretty good chance of meeting a bad fate.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in the US they just shoot them on the street these days. That's
In the
what happens.
face.
Yeah. Sorry. Too soon?
For people I love, or even sometimes for myself, I don't have to explain to God what suffering is like and why it's really horrible, because God isn't an observer. God's a participant in that. That's somehow reassuring, and that's not true of all faiths, but it's true of my faith.
God's a participant in that. So Jesus is a participant. So if you so think about the morality that you're going through here, right? So think about this from a moral standpoint. What he's arguing is that if God puts himself through 3 days of suffering, all of the suffering that everybody else endures is justified. No, absolutely not. No.
Even if
Sorry,
it
sir,
were
no.
the most intense suffering possible. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying Jesus had a great time, but I mean, there's a few like the thing that the Israelites and the Canaanites used to do, where they'd throw people in the metal bowl and roast them, for instance. It might be more painful. It might be.
Yeah, it might be. I mean, they have one thing where in some stories, I don't remember which, but they used to, and this one horrified me when I learned about it as a child. Like, it was like, is like covering them in like honey and then burying them near ants and letting the ants pick them apart. Like, that is
Ooh.
horrific. And yeah, you know, I just, yeah. Don't get me wrong, crucifixion is horrible. Like, gotcha. But, you know, at least they stabbed him in the side so he'd bleed out faster. You know, it could have been worse. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, but the whole idea that if you torture yourself for 3 days or have somebody torture you for 3 days, that then you get to go off and waterboard everybody. No, absolutely not. No, that is not a justification that you are putting yourself through a similar experience for a period of time. No.
It's bullshit too, philosophically, because it's like saying he subjected himself to the same evil, which gives him the moral authority to inflict evil on other people. The fuck are you arguing, Francis?
Yeah, it's weird. It's very weird. This is a weird line of argumentation. And, again, does not actually address rising from the dead.
And then the resurrection. That 3 days later, the tomb was empty. The stone had rolled away. And that multiple witnesses saw what appeared to be the risen Christ in various settings before the ascension. Those require serious attention. And when you consider that many of those individuals...
Well, we don't know that they did. We know that, like, because the people that wrote that they saw the boulder rolled away and stuff, we don't even know that was the actual apostles that wrote that, because the Gospels are anonymous. And this is the problem with what Collins is saying about their reliability, that we don't know for sure that the apostles wrote them. So, you know, usually reliability is how credible the source is, right? Like, so somebody who is a like a shit poster on 4chan is like less credible in writing something than you know, a evolutionary biologist, right? Like, we sort of have this idea of credibility when they're writing. There were historians in the area. There was Josephus in the area, you know, like, and who didn't mention this at all. Like, even though he was writing stuff, no, you know, why wouldn't he mention all of this stuff? He was basically in the area, and he didn't mention it in the slightest. You know, it's kind of baffling. You know,
Paul write about any of this prior to his conversion, right? Like, all of Paul's letters start at the Damascus Road. He mentions vaguely being a hunter of Christians before that.
Yes.
But we know he could write before that. And if he was writing letters to churches after his conversion, surely he was writing letters to someone beforehand. Why don't we have any of the pre-conversion writings of Paul?
Well, I mean, you could argue that none of them survived for one reason or another. You know, like, you could argue that the church didn't want to include the writings of Paul. Like you sort of apologetics to a lot of people. But I think what's more fascinating is that, and we've discussed this before, in writing to all of those early churches, he doesn't even mention the empty tomb. Like, he doesn't mention this is supposed to be the single, like, incontrovertible evidence that the tomb was sealed with a boulder. And when they came and rolled away the boulder, no one possibly could have gotten to it, and his body's gone. And Paul doesn't even mention it. Like, this incredible evidence is really, really telling. It's really telling.
It's not even the lack of that in Paul's initial narrative. It's later on when Paul, together with, as I understand it, the author of Luke/Acts, go to Jerusalem to meet with the surviving disciples who are still in the city. And none of them mention it to him either.
Right.
Or the 500 witnesses.
Yeah. I mean, he says there were 500 witnesses, but he doesn't say who they are. Like, he doesn't actually say, there's these people that are witnesses. He just says there's 500 witnesses to him rising from the dead. It doesn't, but not mentioning the empty tomb. I found out something as well later, that there was something else that seemed to be maybe written in post. The prophecy about the second temple being destroyed, right? Like, Paul doesn't mention that prophecy. Like, all throughout his writings, he never mentions, hey, he made a prophecy about the second temple. You know that he's the real deal because the second temple will be destroyed. In fact, Paul references a prophecy that he will be seated on the throne in the temple, which could be the temple of his body or another temple, but it could be the second temple, but he never mentions that. And then come the Gospels, they're sort of saying, oh, Jesus prophesied the destruction of the second temple. When did that happen? In 70 AD. When were the Gospels written? The earliest around 70 AD, right? So is it a case that Jesus prophesied this, or is it a case that they wrote in after the second temple was destroyed that Jesus prophesied this? We don't know, right? So this prophecy may not actually be a prophecy, and I found that incredibly interesting.
Individuals went to their deaths, asserting that, and were not recanting that claim to save themselves at the last.
Oh, come on, dude. These are basic apologetics talking points. Like, we don't exactly know for sure how most of the apostles died. And, Judas, for instance, like, he was hung, and he also tripped and his innards burst open like a water balloon, apparently. And, like, watching Christians try to square those two things away is actually hilarious. Like, saying, oh, he was hung and then he fell off the thing and his innards spilled over. It's like, come on.
Then he exploded.
And then he exploded. Yeah, I don't. This is apologetics trying to square that circle, and it just does not make sense, because people that are hung, they don't explode. They don't trip. Like, what are you talking about? It's very weird. It's very weird. So most of them, the idea that I think it was Peter was crucified upside down, I don't think, Dr. Kipp will correct me, he's in the chat, he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have any actual evidence of that happening. And I do want to remind people that, for things like Mormonism, for instance, Joseph Smith, right? He was killed while in prison by a mob because he broke in and destroyed a printing press, trying to stop them from writing stories about Mormonism, like that they were violent and did all these things. The people had had enough of the Mormons, and they basically lynched him in jail. They claim he was a martyr for that, right? Because of, like, basically mob justice, essentially. And he was killed trying to escape the. Well, he was killed trying to escape the mob. That's the thing. He didn't go, oh, I am righteous, I'm going to die for my beliefs. No, he was trying to escape the mob, who wanted revenge for destroying, a printing press was a big deal at the time. And, he destroyed, the ability for them to get the truth out, basically, about Mormonism. And they still claim that he died a martyr and never recanted his beliefs. So how do we know that they had the ability to recant, that it wasn't just, hey, you're riling the people up, hang him, or, cut his head off or do whatever? How do they know that they even had the ability to recant? We don't. Because the only people who have stories or records or things about this is the early church. And I mean, the only one that we've sort of, I think that we've corroborated is somebody who was stabbed, right? Like we've corroborated, hey, this person was stabbed by another person. And it's like, but did he die without recanting, saying he was, it's so weird that they will take this as all of them were martyred when we have no evidence of that. Like did he drink someone else's beer and he was angry? We don't know. By the way, if you are in an Australian pub, never, ever take your glass and tip it upside down. Never do that. Ever. Okay? Because that signals that you want to fight everybody in the pub. Literally every single person.
It's
never do that.
They have a signal for that.
Sorry?
It's I could see there being a signal for saying I want to fight the person to my right or to my left or the owner of this shitty establishment, but that there's a signal saying I want to fight every single person here. How often does this happen that there needs to be a signal for it?
I don't know. It's just one of those things that, Australians, right? Like Australians. Look, did you see the Bondi shooting? Like people arriving on the scene of the Bondi shooting literally got into a fight at the end. I'm not even joking. It's wild. Australians, right? But, I think that it sort of just goes back to mining days kind of thing and sort of because a lot of Australia was, pastures, settling, mining kind of thing. And, there would be pubs that were used by certain segment, like all of the drovers who used to drive, cattle and sheep and stuff. They were called drovers. You probably called them cowboys. We called them drovers. They went to one pub kind of thing, right? Like, so there's near me, there's a herdsman pub, which was like literally herdsman, right? Like they used that pub. So if you were from a rival faction, you may want to go in there and just, create a frigging riot in their pub kind of. Look, it was a different time. I'm just saying it was a different time.
Yeah. We were a little more corporate about things. Like cowboys and drovers were two separate, distinct professions.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, maybe it was in Australia, but all we know about is the drovers.
Those damn drovers.
Sorry?
The damn drovers. They're like freight haulers, but without like things that can move on their own. Like pigs, for example. You wouldn't be a cowboy for pigs. You'd just be a drover.
Apparently, a drover is a former name for cowboys in America. I'm not sure how accurate this is, but in Australia, they're still called drovers. Interesting. So you guys got a new term for it. Oh, that's interesting that we never got. Cool. Well done, you. Buck that English.
Right. We never got posh. We got cowboys.
Sure. Why not?
Who was handing out the language that day?
Look, the English. Seriously, what the hell were they thinking?
Impossible to set aside. How many people would do that if they knew it was? If you have not read Tom Wright's 738-page The Resurrection of the Son of God, that had a big influence on me.
He's at Oxford, right?
Yeah.
He's a friend. But I read this long before I knew him. And the way to gather the case from both biblical and non-biblical sources, I found very compelling. Is it absolute proof? No, otherwise everybody would have decided to agree with it. I find it very compelling. I think the basis of the evidence there, trying to decide what's the most likely outcome, apply Occam's razor to this. The most likely explanation is that he really was raised from the dead. Now, you might say to me, wait a minute, you're a scientist, and you've just been the word to be broken. This is breaking them in a huge way. Well,
in what world is magic the most likely explanation?
At least he realized his error, right? Because he went, oh yeah, he's sort of, the most likely explanation is this one, but I've already said, like, there's natural laws in place that aren't to be violated. And that's why when a precept brings up, oh, the uniformity of nature, they have the problem, not us. They have the problem because they think that God could intervene at any time and I could just ignore the law of gravity. Whereas we don't believe in that stuff. So, yeah. But this is what I mean about him not showing his epistemology or his chain of reasoning that gets him to these conclusions. Like, for instance, a miracle is the most likely, but he's not actually explaining why it is the most likely. He's just saying it's the most likely. Because if you look at it rationally and logically, we've seen things happen for natural reasons billions of times. I have never seen a miracle, ever. Like, I've never seen a magical occurrence. I've never seen anything that is not rationally and logically explained by pure physicalism. Maybe he has, and it would be enlightening for him to sort of say what he's seen, that the most rational explanation is magic or miracles or whatever the hell he wants to call it.
Yeah, it's such a wild claim, and the way he presents it, it does nothing but undermine his credibility, because it's saying Occam's razor tells us that whatever I want to be true is the most likely thing for no reason other than I want it to be true.
Correct. Wild, right?
Well,
yeah, but if they're God's laws and God chose in this exceptional moment to suspend them, to do the most important thing that had ever been done, then sure, God has the power to do that too. I can go with that.
A lot of ifs in there. If these are God's laws, and if God chose, it's like, well, you haven't established that they're God's laws. You haven't established that God wanted anything. It was more just a deist God before. It's kind of very odd. And I think that a lot of O'Connor's questioning goes to the heart of that. Like, why all the suffering if God just wanted humans to have a conversation? Like, why? It doesn't make a lot of sense.
As I've often posited, it's so strange to me that people say, like Francis just said, it's the resurrection of Jesus is the most important thing ever in the entire history of the universe. Cool. Why, if it's so damn important, did God go about it in such a way that it's easily dismissible with even an iota of critical thinking? Why does it require the total suspension of all epistemology to arrive at that conclusion? Why not do something in front of everyone? Like, as I've often suggested, at the moment of death, Jesus's eyes burst into flame and he flies off the cross and then just levels Jerusalem or something, to make it very clear there is incontrovertible divine power at play. And then he declares himself the God incarnate. He cannot be killed, and then drives the Romans the hell out of Israel and fulfills the prophecy he was supposed to in the first place. Maybe that would have accomplished the most important thing in history. Maybe being the most important thing in history, it would justify that tiny fraction of divine power. Maybe.
Well, I mean, he doesn't even have to do that. All he has to do is, instead of appearing to the apostles who believe he's special already, is just appear to Pontius Pilate and say, you thought you killed me. You're wrong. Write it down. And then fly off into the universe. Like, seriously, I don't know why there's so, like, when you consider you have an omniscient, omnipotent God, there's so many things he could have done way better at the resurrection, and the ones that he did do better, there's no record of them, like the saints rising from their grave and wandering around Jerusalem, which no historian recorded, including Josephus in the area at the time. As I said previously, you think he would have written that down, but no, apparently not. Or the eclipse and earthquake that happened at the same time. You would think a historian would say, hey, weird day, the sky darkened and had no sun, and there was, like, the ground shook as well. The gods, the Yahweh must be out of his mind, because don't forget, Josephus was a Jew. So, you would think a historian would have written that down, but no, apparently not. Apparently that was not worth recording. So, so to sort of say, hey, it's the most reliable book, it's only the most reliable if you presuppose it's reliable. Like, if you actually take, an independent and sort of look outside of the religion and say, hey, what events can we confirm in actual history? It's very unreliable. Just saying.
Mm-hmm.
You've had so many people on your podcast talking about this, about the resurrection.
Yeah.
You've had William Lane Craig on. You've had Bart Ehrman on.
Yes.
A lot of people opposing viewpoints. What is your current perspective of the resurrection?
What do you got against it?
Well, I think it'd be great if Christianity were true. There's a lot about, if we look at what the Gospels actually say, I think might be out of accord with what Christians tend to actually believe about Jesus. But the resurrection is something that the Gospels...
I want to clear this up. I think that a lot of people go, well, Christians do bad things, Christianity doesn't have a good message, it's horrible. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I do understand the arguments that Christianity provides a lot of cover, a lot of hedges for them to hide in, like really bad people to hide in. I get that argument and things like that. But I don't think, if you look at Jesus as simply a philosophical figure, right, like a Socrates or a Aristotle kind of thing, I don't think his ideology is bad. Okay, he says some terrible stuff. I get it. I get that there's some horrible stuff that he says. There's some bad stuff, but there's some good in there too. I don't think it's all bad. I think that a lot of the things like, loving your neighbor and things are a good idea if you want a healthy, happy society, right? Like, at least having some respect for your neighbors and, the stranger coming in from other lands and things like that. I think that there's a lot of good there, but that doesn't mean that Jesus was supernatural. That's the thing. A lot of it had been said by other people before Jesus. A lot of it was he inherited from the Jewish tradition of how to treat other Jews, and he just expanded it to other people apart from Jews. I think there's a lot of good in there. There is some bad as well. But, I think this whole thing of Jesus and the New Testament is worthless, it's horrible, it's all bad. It's really not. There's a lot worse books of ideology than the New Testament you could find. The problem comes... Like the Old Testament, yes. Not a great book. The Old Testament's way worse, granted. But, I don't think it is the worst ever. And I don't think, between the Codex of what is it? The Codex of Hammurabi? Hammurabi. And the New Testament, probably take the New Testament, right? Definitely take the New Testament. Like, there's some good things in both, there's bad things in both, but it is, but the problem comes that people believe it's so supernatural that, like, for instance, they're like, oh, I'm Christian, hate communists. And it's like, dude, Jesus would be a communist under any definition if he existed, right? Like, sell all your products and give them to the people that need them is absolutely a communist idea. Right, like it's not even close, or at least a socialist, and that they sort of will strive against them. It's wild, but it's not terrible
for sure. But
having said that, you don't need it. You don't need it. You don't need to have the New Testament to be a good person or to figure out that harming people is really bad for your society, for yourself, and for the people around you. You don't need the Old Testament, New Testament. You don't need a holy book to teach you that. All you need is your sense of empathy and your sense of reciprocity, and knowing what, if you do want a good society or not. That's it. That's all you need. He killed a fig tree out of spite. Okay, yes. Look. Yeah, he did commit first degree figicide. I do admit that. Okay, I will admit that. But somebody can be a creep and also have good philosophical ideas. I wish that wasn't so, but it is so, right? Because you have people like Maslow, right? He created a hierarchy for human needs and sort of had on that, we need these certain things, we don't need these, but they're preferable, and made a hierarchy. Now, he was a monster, right? Like, he was he believed in eugenics, he was a terrible person, but that hierarchy of needs isn't a bad idea in and of itself. It is the case that we have these things, these pressures that we aim towards, like, food and water and shelter, obviously, that kind of stuff. But there's also, love and commitment, acceptance from society. There's other things that we seem to need as well to be happy human beings. But Maslow was a monster. We've then refined his ideas to be better, but, it doesn't mean his original idea was wrong. Time that killed one of his classmates. Yeah. Well, if you read the Gospels that didn't make it into the Bible, Jesus just struck a child dead for no reason in particular.
Infancy Gospels. The
yeah.
Gospels. There's a few fun stories out there.
Yeah.
Press quite hard, and the New Testament press is quite hard. I am, broadly speaking, suspicious of the veracity of the accounts for a number of reasons. I think that there are, particularly the Gospels, are a big mix of legend, attempted biography, and theologizing. I think that, for example, the birth narratives, I don't believe that this actually happened. I think there's good reason to think that in at least one case, the birth narrative was added later than the rest of the gospel was written. I think these are quite obviously legendary accounts of the kind that we often see in ancient biographies of trying to give people spectacular births. Somebody sort of imagining that this must be the case with Jesus. There are a lot of reasons to think that might be the case. We don't have...
You are aware that lots of people disagree.
Yeah, and cool. I think he's got a point with the birth. Like, a census that requires you to go to your place of birth makes no sense whatsoever. Like, it just doesn't. If you want a census of your country, and the reasons why the Romans did it is because, like any census that's done these days, we need to know where resources need to be attributed. So we need to know, how many children somebody has, where they are. So we know that how many people are living in an area, what their occupation is. So we know, hey, we need more, pardon the pun, but carpenters in this end, and I'm not making a Jesus reference, but carpenters is in this, and we need more potters over here. So getting people to return to the place of their birth for a census is ludicrous when you understand the purpose of a census. It is to understand the demographics as a snapshot of a country or a province of the Roman Empire. It is not to make people go to the place of their birth. Could you imagine that? I mean, I know that people were a lot more sedentary back in those days, but could you imagine you need to go to the place of your birth and they have to travel from Egypt to Rome? That is not a small trip. That is a long voyage in those days. Like, seriously, what are you talking about?
What about people who immigrated into the empire? It's a big empire. Lots of immigrants. There's a crazy amount of nonsense factors, but also there's being born 10 years apart. Like, one story has him under one ruler who died in 4 BCE and the other under another ruler who didn't come into power until 6 CE. So it's a minimum of 10 years apart. There's so many facets like that. The flight to Egypt, that's only in one gospel. In a different gospel, they do a different thing. You know, it's clearly at least one version is fake and possibly both.
Yeah.
How do you as we're talking back and forth, how do you discern? And I talked about this stuff about evidence proof earlier, and then just trusting sources of
hit
information.
3 hours. Do you think we're going to get through? I don't think we're going to get through the rest. I'm sorry. I talk way too much. I talk way too much. I mean, we can. What did we have it on? It was like 40 minutes or so, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah, 41:35. So it's roughly 40 minutes. So if we go to about 40 minutes left, I guess we should be able to get through on to part 3. I feel like there's been so much to talk about. I think it's because of that lack of reasoning and epistemology by Francis. He doesn't explain why he thinks anything. He just says what he thinks. And it's a frustration that a lot of creators and philosophers and people like, Matt Delahunty, they experience, because it's like, don't tell me what you think. Tell me why, or what you believe. Tell me why you believe it. It's not really the what that's important. It's the why that's important. And I feel like he's doing that. Do you want to go for maybe
the difference in the way we process information, the way we think? That because Francis is a Christian, it doesn't matter how you get to Jesus. All that matters is that you do think Jesus is the answer.
Right.
So it's not how you think, it's what you think. Whereas we are like, it doesn't matter if we agree with you.
Right.
We can be wrong. We know that. That's why we want to know why, not what.
Yeah.
It's a processing thing.
Yeah, I really, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's a result of sort of doing some sort of deconstruction in our lives, because that is the point of deconstruction, is to say, this is what I believe, but why do I believe it? And challenging yourself on that. So maybe it's because we've done that we can give a ready answer to why do you believe these things, because we've already thought about it. We've already said, hey, I believe that scientific is really reliable. Why do I believe that? Well, it's because it produces the best results and gives us the most accurate information, whereas, say prayer and church doesn't. It doesn't seem to produce the same results that science does. So, we can lead down these things of going, all right, well, how do I justify this? How do I justify that? Probably because we've thought about it before. But I don't know. I don't know. That's an interesting question, isn't it? Yeah. Well, do you want to call it now? Do you want to go for maybe 5 more minutes and then call it?
Either way is fine.
Okay. Oh, we'll go for 5 more minutes. I'm kind of interested in him giving his reason why the resurrection is true is basically because the Bible says so. And I find that, so this is where we enter into intellectual sort of inconsistency. Because if you said, well, why do you think that, Muhammad did miracles? And you said, well, the Quran says so. He would go, well, that's not enough evidence. But for the resurrection, it's like, well, the Bible says so, and that's enough. It's very strange the way that they think, because I want to be consistent on how I evaluate things. So I do, if somebody says, hey, but you think, Julius Caesar is real and there's no, I want to be consistent about these things. I'm not sure that Christians do.
Like another one we used to bring up somewhat often, haven't mentioned in a while, and I see there's a lot of new people who weren't around back in the day when we first started these years ago. Sai Baba. A lot of similar claims as Jesus, a lot of miracles, a lot of witnesses. A lot of those witnesses are still alive. So why aren't the Christians convinced by literally millions of witnesses, most of whom are still alive?
Yep.
Because they're not invested. They just dismiss it.
I believe when Sai Baba died, they said he was reincarnated into somebody. Like they just sort of said, hey, he's reincarnated. He's still sort of alive as, a different person kind of thing. I think that's sort of
this life. He already was a reincarnation of a previous Sai Baba.
Right.
So he didn't return. He didn't resurrect, but he did reincarnate. So it's a similar level miracle.
Yeah.
How do you guys go about being like, I think there's good evidence to suggest that this. So like, where would you be getting your sources, and where would you be getting your sources for this?
When it comes to the Gospels, I think that we have to sort of look at cross-source corroboration, right? And so, broadly speaking, we have the Synoptic Gospels, which most scholars believe Mark comes first, and then Luke and Matthew use Mark. They're aware of Mark. They copy it sometimes verbatim, but they also seem to have this source of quotations of Jesus, which has been called Q for quell, the German word for source, right? We don't know if that exists or not. If it does, then we've got this extra source Q. If we don't, then we essentially just have, Matthew and Luke's other source, wherever they got that information, right? There's also stuff that's only in Matthew. So broadly speaking, scholars will refer to that, wherever that came from, as just M, and the stuff that's only in Luke as L. And then you have John's Gospel, which seems to not know of the Synoptic Gospels, and it's like totally different, right? And so we have different sources that we can pull out from these stories.
It's kind of what you would expect.
Exactly, right? And so we have.
Well, it's what you would expect for, the documents written from stories years later, and it's what you would expect if somebody was making a religion from the ground up. It's what you would expect either way. It's not sort of indicative that Jesus actually did miracles. It is what you would expect.
Well, it makes me think of movies. The way every 20 to 30 years, some movies get remade, and some of them is literally every 20 to 30 years. Like Dracula. There's a Dracula movie.
Spider-Man is being remade every damn year these days, really.
Right.
It's
and some parts of the story are clearly taken from earlier iterations, but some parts of the story are completely new.
You're right.
In every iteration. It's exactly the same thing.
Right.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, we've got Q, we've got M, we've got L, but all of these different sort of sources. And what I think is that when a story occurs independently across numerous of these sources, there's good reason to think that it happened. And when it only occurs in one, we can't say it didn't, but we have less good reason to think that it did. So for example, the story of doubting Thomas only appears in John's Gospel. That makes me sort of like less confident that it happened as a historical fact than I would be of stories that appeared in all of the Gospels, for example.
Yeah. How dare you doubt the doubter? It's an Uno reverse of doubting. Yes. Yep.
But like the crucifixion, for example, happened. We have all kinds of evidence to produce that happened from all kinds of different sources, right? Maybe the story of doubting Thomas happened, maybe, but I can't say that with the same.
So you believe that Jesus was crucified?
Yes, yeah. And I think that I can't think of a scholar who would not think that's the case, except someone like Richard Carrier or someone who's a Jesus mythicist altogether.
He wasn't really killed on the cross.
Oh, and of course, Muslims. Of course, yeah. That's another large group of people who probably don't think that.
But Alex, you're coming at this with priors that we should probably talk about.
He's coming at it with priors. He's coming at it with priors. What do you mean he's coming at it with priors?
Also, worth noting that Alex isn't what he's calling priors for this conversation are the terminal end of his entire education and career in evaluating the information. It's not a prior if you arrived at it by fucking research.
Yeah. Sorry, I have to comment on Fantastic Four.
Fair.
You approach the Gospels, you're approaching as a skeptic. And so when you find evidence of something that doesn't quite measure up with the cleanest possible explanation, you intend to ascribe value to that as something, aha, there you see. There's a reason for me to be skeptical about doubting Thomas, because it only appears once. Whereas I come at that and think there are 4 different perspectives, one of them very different, and it has this particular story. That's a really interesting story. I don't know why I should feel doubtful that it's true on that basis, because my prior is, there's a lot here that really rings true for me.
It's not like,
oh, it rings true for you.
Well,
hooray, Francis. You're a fucking scientist.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah, and this is right up there with like the creation calls for a creator. Like it really is just, hey, I feel this way about it, so it must be true. That's a terrible way to evaluate reality around you. And as a scientist, he should absolutely know that. But, he keeps his science and his personal stuff separate, which is good. Don't get me wrong, that's good. It's just, shouldn't you be applying a more, rigorous scientific standard to the things that you believe in your personal life as well? Maybe.
I mean, maybe we're the crazy ones by thinking that maybe it's the tism, is we think there are these rules for critical thinking. We can see the obvious utility in them. We should apply them to literally everything. Maybe we're being too literal. Maybe we'd be happier or something if we just took this one area of belief and for some reason that nobody's ever managed to explain to us, accepted it from the same critical thinking process that clearly is beneficial in every other aspect of life.
Right.
Maybe that's the case, but I don't know why we should do that yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
You should think that it probably didn't happen or something. What I'm saying is that we have less confidence in the historicity of the story of Doubting Thomas than we do in the crucifixion. I think you'd probably agree with that too, right? Like if you had to say which are you more certain happened, right? Exactly. So that's what I'm saying is as a starting point to see how we can.
But your introduction to the Gospels was all about the skeptic part, and mine is more about wow, there is such truth and beauty here.
Yeah.
Our priors are different.
Well, of course, for me, I'm looking at these as ancient texts and trying to uncover what they mean. What were the authors trying to do? What did they achieve in doing? And like, you know, what is the genre of this text? Like, what are we attempting to do here? For example, I think that John's Gospel is much more theological. It seems like the author of John's Gospel was trying to be more theological.
Yeah, that comes across.
And so, well, that might be, if we were talking about Doubting Thomas, for example, Doubting Thomas is a very moralized message. Blessed are those who believe without seeing. You know, it's about empiricism. It's about
yeah, and it's the wrong message about empiricism kind of thing, you know. Because it's like, well, if you accept it without testing it at all, you're better off than if you just accept it by feels. And that is not a good message to give. It's not great. I mean, it's good if you're starting a religion. It's not great if you're looking for the truth.
Well, it's even better given the fact that everything that appears in a story that doesn't appear in the other ones was put into it for a reason. The author made a choice. And so when you already have a few different versions of a story running around, and there's still people who aren't convinced and they want proof, and you put in your story, better if you don't ask for proof, maybe there's a reason for that.
Maybe.
And so it seems that if you've got an author who's trying to do theology more, that sort of fits in with that picture, right? So when I'm trying to understand these texts, I'm looking at like what am I dealing with here, right? And the reason that I bring up those different sources is to say that if something occurs in all of them, then I think we've got very good reason to think that it's true. One thing that Bart Ehrman presses quite hard, and I think he's probably right about this, is Jesus as the apocalyptic prophet. It seems that Jesus believed that the world was about to end. And we have like a few reasons to think that those quotes where he's talking about the world as about to end are probably accurate. And that they wouldn't be made up by like, you know, future followers of Jesus. One interesting example of this, by the way, is when Jesus says that to his 12 disciples, he says that, you know, after this all happens, the 12 of you will be sat on the 12 thrones, which is a weird thing to say given that Judas was among the 12 he was talking to, implying that Judas is going to be on one of these 12 thrones. That doesn't seem like something a future Christian would have made up when they knew that Jesus betrayed him. And so it's likely that this is something Jesus actually said, right? Because it wouldn't have been made up. Right?
Okay, I might call it there. I'm sorry. That's a really good point. And also, you know, he clearly says to the assembled gathering that, you know, the kingdom of God will come onto earth before some of you will have tasted death. And that is clearly not the case. Because even if you think that we're in the tribulation or whatever, it certainly has not come to pass that the kingdom of God has been established on earth. So, you know, I think there is a lot of good arguments and good evidence that it was a doomsday religion. It was the end is nigh, the end is imminent religion. And 2,000 years later, they're still waiting for it. And in some cases, trying to accelerate towards it, which is quite frankly horrifying. And probably one of the worst things about Christianity is it makes you look forward to a cataclysmic event that will destroy everything. Just saying.
Yeah, I don't like it. No.
And as I mentioned, a lot of the prophecies that were put in there at the after the events, or it seems to be after the events, and the prophecy about the second temple being rebuilt, I believe that sort of comes from him saying that, hey, people will be seated on the throne in the temple and the temple being destroyed. You know, like it seems like during Jesus' time, he did not know the temple would be destroyed, which is strange that then it comes in as a prophecy in the Gospels.
Yeah, people be tinkering. But we know people were tinkering, you know, like Paul wrote warnings about plagiarists using his name, and Revelations had that whole passage about don't add any more verses, you know, because people were adding verses.
Yeah. And sort of, now and then you see apologists have to do these mental gymnastics to make it work, like, oh, the temple was a spiritual temple, not a physical one, kind of thing. Or, you know, you can do this with the prophecies of Notre Dame or the prophecies of anybody. Like it really is just the case that, you know, you can argue, oh, well, it meant this kind of hyperbolic metaphorical thing, so it was actually came true. No, that's not how prophecies work. No, stop. No. So Jesus failed prophecies? Absolutely. Do they do mental gymnastics to make them work? Absolutely. And we got to push back on that. But I found Francis Collins terrible. Not that he's nasty, not that he's horrible at all. I don't mind him as a person. He's fine. It's just he really does not, like this whole thing of priors. We know that if you take a neutral position in your priors like Alex is doing, rather than an emotional one, which, like he said, emotionally, I find it beautiful, makes me feel good. You know, that's, you know, it's beautiful. It's a subjective sort of stance, while Alex is going, hey, what do we know about history from, you know, interpreting history in the past? How can we, if you are objective about it, it's usually more accurate. And I think that there's a lot to be said about that, but you can't say, hey, our priors, you're being objective, I'm being subjective, so mine should be treated equally as priors. I don't, you know, you're basically just describing confirmation bias because you think it's beautiful. I don't see how that's a very good way to interpret historical texts. And I might add, he doesn't do that for other historical texts. You know, because if you're determining which historical texts are true based upon their beauty to you, I mean, come on, my guy, what are you doing? Oh, if the Quran's beautiful, then it's true. If it's not beautiful, then it's not true. What are we talking about here? Like, seriously, it's ridiculous. That is a ridiculous way to evaluate historical texts for their truthfulness or not. Just saying. Anyway, do you have any other thoughts to add? I'm sorry we went to a part 3. I did talk a lot. I've been talking a lot lately. It's weird.
It's all good. That's one of the things we do. And honestly, it doesn't even bug me, because like we're both here to like evaluate the things, but also to discuss with each other and with the people who come visit us in the live chat. And similarly, the people here live are here to hear from us. Like if they wanted us to not talk, they could just go watch the debate themselves. So yeah. Don't worry about it. Like,
yeah, fair enough.
Part is the point.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just in it's over the last 2 weeks, I've been in a weird mood kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you've had a good dissection. I have. I've found it really interesting though. I think Alex has done fantastic as per usual. There's things I disagree on him about, but hey, that's cool. We can disagree. That's totally fine. You know, and I really want to push back against, you know, Francis Collins, obviously he's not a young earth creationist. He's not one of these evangelicals kind of thing. He's probably a decent guy, probably let you borrow his lawnmower. I don't know. You know, there's no reason to dehumanize people because they have different beliefs. You know, I think that you should sort of, you know, see whether Francis Collins is doing harm to people. And if he is, then that's a problem. But I think that for the most part, most Christians are fine. I just think that this kind of thinking can lead you down some very bad roads. Whether or not you get down that road is another story. But I think that, this whole lack of, if you like the Mein Kampf, does that make it true? Like, is that a good way to evaluate things? I don't think so. I find his epistemology incredibly lacking. But he's not a philosopher, he's a biologist, so it doesn't really surprise me. And I think that this is good for people to see, that O'Connor has these ideas of systems and how we find things and how we do things that are reliable, and Francis Collins seems to just have, well, the Bible's reliable, without actually considering what is it that makes it reliable. Is it the reliability of the authors? Who are the authors? What were they like? We don't know. For the most part of the Gospels, we don't know. Do they have contradictions? Absolutely they do. Has stuff been added to it? Absolutely has been. Yes, we know that for a fact. So how is it reliable is what I'd be going to. How is that a reliable text? Because, okay, I'll pay, it's beautiful, right? Like, it has a lot of poetic stuff in it. There's, you think it's beautiful. Great, fantastic, awesome. How is it reliable? It's not the beauty that determines whether it's accurate. It's the reliability. But yeah, next week. Oh, you've done it already. All right, fantastic. You are way more organized than me, and I love it. Yeah, and tell us what you got going on. Have you still got your daily show going, Learning Live Together?
Learn Together Live, yes.
Learn Together Live. Sorry, I messed that up.
It's all good. It's half my people still call it Hot Topic. It just
okay. That's cool. Yeah, it takes a while.
But yeah, that's every weekday at 11 a.m. Eastern time.
I still call it Twitter, and that changed ages ago. So
we all still call it Twitter.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, so. Do be kind to yourself. Do be kind to each other, especially Christians that are not aboard the whole fascism train. Please get them on board. We don't need to push these people away if they're going to, because, even the fundamentalist Christians, they'll listen to other Christians before they'll listen to us. So having them on board is really useful because they are more convincing to their own religion. Now, do I wish it was a different world where we could go, hey, you're a believer in Christ, you're obviously irrational and stuff? Yeah, probably, but that's not the world we live in. We have to get along with the people around us. If they're not causing harm, then it's not, it's not a reason to, pardon my pun, crucify them. Okay, it just isn't. Especially when we're trying to convince people to assist us against a really, really horrible situation. We need all the decent people we can. If they think it's horrible as well, then they're a potential ally, not an enemy. Because we disagree on a God or creator, that doesn't really matter. As long as they have the same priorities for society that we do, it's not a problem. If they don't, yeah, I can see that being a problem. But priorities, people, priorities. But do take care, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.
Yeah.